Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Russell Rusty and Rebecca Becky Porter. Russell Rusty and his wife, Rebecca Becky Porter, bought a farm in Willard, Missouri, USA, in 1957. At the time, it was a small settlement with a close-knit community where everyone knew one another. The crime rate was low, and life was peaceful, quiet. On April 19, 2011, Rebecca, aged 40, unexpectedly missed her scheduled shift at work. She hadn't mentioned any health issues beforehand, which raised concern among her coworkers and later her supervisors. That morning, the family's neighbor stepped out onto the porch and noticed Rebecca's car still parked outside. Rebecca typically left for work early, as she usually woke up at around 7:30 and left the house by 8 a.m. thinking she might be feeling unwell. The neighbor decided to check on her. However, when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. At first, he assumed she might be resting due to fatigue and didn't think much of it. But as the day went on and the house remained silent, his concern began to grow. Later, Rebecca's daughter, Jessica, arrived at the house, concerned because she hadn't been able to reach her mother by phone. The neighbor informed Jessica about the unusual situation. Together, they knocked on the door, but still, no one answered. When they peered through a window, they saw the house in disarray, leading them to contact the police. Their call followed an earlier one placed by Rebecca's son, who had already reached out to law enforcement after being unable to contact his mother. He expressed his concern and requested a welfare check for the Porter family. When the patrol arrived at the house, they were immediately hit by a strong smell of cleaning products, noticeable even from the porch. The officers inspected the property and peered through the windows. Inside, they found the house in total disarray, particularly in the kitchen and the main bedroom. In the bedroom, the bed was out of order, the mattress tilted, the blanket pulled off, and belongings like a handbag and a mobile phone scattered across the floor. There were clear signs of a struggle, which made the house resemble a crime scene. In the kitchen, they discovered a cut window screen, suggesting it might have been used as the entry point for a burglary. The situation seemed to point to a break-in. However, upon entering the house, the officers uncovered something that didn't support the burglary theory. Surprisingly, many valuable items were untouched despite the chaotic state. Rebecca and Russell were nowhere to be found, fueling suspicions of foul play. The police's findings prompted them to seal off the area and launch an investigation into possible kidnappings. When Rebecca's son arrived at the farm, he assisted the police by providing helpful insights. What deeply concerned him was the presence of his stepfather's medication, which was still at the house. Russell, his stepfather, relied on these pills every day after medical treatment, and Russell would never leave them behind if he left the house. Rebecca's wallet, which she always carried with her, was found in the marital bedroom. Her car remained parked outside the house, and inside the car were her bank cards, with the key left in the ignition. This raised serious concerns, as it was clear something alarming had occurred. Although the house had a strong smell of cleaning products, only one bottle of bleach was found, and it was still full. No empty containers of cleaning products were discovered, yet it was evident they had been used very recently. This seemed suspicious. Someone had likely discarded them after use. It appeared the perpetrator had quickly poured bleach over various areas in an attempt to erase evidence, with pools of bleach still visible in some spots. The police found a computer monitor under the table, but the rest of the system was missing. It appeared to have been disassembled, as some wires were still present. Upon investigation, the police discovered that this computer managed multiple cameras located both inside and outside the house. The theft of the system unit meant all the stored data had also been taken. It was clear the perpetrator had stolen the evidence to prevent it from falling into the detectives' hands. Additionally, it was determined that all the cameras were connected to a single security system. The system had sent out an alarm prior to the incident, but no response was received. Investigators noted the unusually large number of CCTV cameras, which covered the entire property without any blind spots. Such extensive security measures in a quiet, safe neighborhood raised suspicions. Many assumed the system was installed to comfort Rebecca, whose nerves and fearfulness had grown with age. However, the situation was concerning since they lived in an area where residents were familiar with one another and serious crimes had not occurred in years. The police theorized that they might have felt threatened or frightened by someone, possibly an enemy, who acted against them. The stolen cleaning products indicated that the criminal might have been trying to erase evidence of blood, leading investigators to fear the worst. However, Rebecca and Russell's children rejected this idea. They argued their parents had no enemies, were peaceful by nature, and rarely engaged in conflicts, let alone provoke someone to commit a crime. The neighbors were also shocked by the news. The Porters were viewed as deeply religious and upstanding people, attending church every Sunday and frequently participating in neighborhood events. They seemed friendly to everyone. However, people who knew the family better informed police about Russell's troubled past. Before meeting Rebecca, he had struggled with alcohol and substance addiction, which raised the possibility of him relapsing into old habits, accruing debts, or associating with dangerous individuals. However, there were no recent signs of such behavior. Rebecca made great efforts to help Russell overcome his problems and prevent relapse. Many neighbors heard these speculations, and rumors began spreading. Some even believed a Mexican cartel might have been involved in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police explored different possibilities, such as one spouse harming the other and fleeing or both voluntarily ending their lives together. Bloodstains were discovered in the house despite attempts to clean, reinforcing the police's theory of a violent crime. However, even by the third day of the investigation, there were no concrete leads or evidence. Rebecca and Russell were officially declared missing, and the search efforts intensified. Authorities suspected at least one person had been harmed in the house. Suspicion grew as both spouses had left behind essential personal belongings they used daily, suggesting they might both be victims. Neighbors and friends were left wondering and trying to figure out what had happened to Rebecca and Russell. Everyone was bewildered by their sudden and inexplicable disappearance. As more time passed without any sign of them, anxiety grew among family members and local residents. Disturbing rumors spread throughout the community, creating fear among the public. Approximately 5,000 flyers featuring pictures of Rebecca and Russell were printed. Family members and volunteers distributed them widely, placing them at gas stations, grocery stores, truck stops, and other areas frequented by locals. The local cycling community has joined in a search effort, assisting by interviewing residents for clues to Rebecca and Russell's whereabouts. A reward has been offered, and detectives have been working closely with relatives and friends of the family to gather information about the surroundings, identify possible suspects, such as the kidnapper or killer. They also investigated any recent or past conflicts the Porters might have had with other people. Through this, it was revealed that a family member, Robert Campbell, had been involved in a dispute with Russell. Robert, who drove a pickup truck, lived near the Russells and became the primary suspect in their disappearance. Detectives begin investigating his life and relationships, uncovering a long-standing conflict between him and the Russell family. Their disputes often escalated into heated arguments, and about 3 weeks before Rebecca and Russell vanished, the tension reached a breaking point. Both parties obtained restraining orders against each other. Naturally, detectives approached Robert at his home to question him about the incident leading up to Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. It was revealed that Robert had been claiming ownership of the family farm, even though he had no legal rights to it. Previously, Robert had lived on the property until new owners, Russell, who inherited the farm from his grandfather, and his wife Rebecca, moved in. Robert was upset by this, believing that, as the former owner's son, he was entitled to the property. However, he had been excluded from the will due to strained family relationships. Most of the conflict revolved around the farm. Robert proposed splitting the farm with Russell, but Russell refused and presented the ownership documents. This refusal fueled Robert's resentment. Robert believed his claims were valid because, prior to Russell and Rebecca moving in, he had worked on the house. He had renovated the facade, built a second floor, and invested time, money into improving the property. Nevertheless, when Russell took over, they effectively evicted him and dismissed his investments as irrelevant. Rebecca and Russell explained to Robert that, According to the legal documents, he had no rights to the property. His investments did not entitle him to any portion of the farm. Despite this, Robert felt wronged. He demanded that Rebecca and Russell either vacate the property, share ownership, or at least compensate him for his expenses. Unfortunately, they were unable to reach any form of agreement. The situation escalated, and it was clear that no resolution would come from the Supreme Court. This created an opportunity for Robert to remove both Rebecca and Russell, as well as seize their property. Detectives observed that Robert was behaving very possessively toward the property that originally belonged to Russell's grandparents and had not been passed down to him. He held deep resentment toward the family, particularly Rebecca and Russell. Eventually, due to ongoing conflicts, he moved his new trailer about half a kilometer away from the farmhouse. Robert seemed to have a strong motive for violent actions, including an attack, kidnapping, or even murder, given the long-standing disputes with the family. Although Robert denied any involvement in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance, claimed that he had an alibi, the evidence complicated matters. On the day of the incident, he was reportedly 150 kilometers away in another city on a business trip with his wife. Despite this alibi, police appeared to piece together a narrative suggesting his involvement. Robert, who lived only a few hundred meters away from the Russells, openly expressed interest in their property and became subject to a restraining order. The farm's CCTV cameras were likely installed due to concerns about him. Witnesses confirmed frequent arguments between Robert and the family. On one occasion, he was seen driving by their home, yelling out the window that their time there was limited, perceived by some as a threat. It was plausible that Robert could have hired someone to carry out the crime since he had a clear motive and might have wished to avoid direct involvement. But could he really harm his own relatives and their spouse? As investigations dug deeper, it was revealed that Robert harbored significant resentment toward them as recently as a year before their disappearance. Rebecca had previously been married before meeting Russell. Her first husband, Terrence, was a local church pastor. Their divorce was complex and highly controversial. 4 months after the split, Rebecca met Russell. At that time, Russell was battling an addiction to illegal substances and alcohol. However, after meeting Rebecca, she became a positive influence in his life, like a breath of fresh air. From the very beginning, she seemed determined to help him overcome his struggles. Russell later admitted that her presence gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Rebecca was more than 10 years older than Russell, which initially unsettled his family. However, they eventually accepted the relationship. On the other hand, Rebecca's family reacted much more negatively. Following her divorce, Rebecca lived with her children and parents, but they strongly disapproved of Russell. As a result, her children stayed with their grandparents and distanced themselves from their mother, upset by her decision to pursue a relationship with a much younger man who had serious addiction issues. In fact, they refused to attend Rebecca and Russell's wedding. The ongoing discord between Rebecca and Terrence wasn't unusual and didn't initially seem like a strong motive for the attack. However, the intricate divorce process brought up several questions, especially concerning a restaurant they had opened and co-owned during their marriage. Neither of them wanted to split the business during the divorce, which could have provided a financial motive for Terrence to target her and her new husband, Russell. At this stage of the investigation, detectives had not identified any other potential suspects. The focus shifted to two individuals, Uncle Robert Campbell, who had a strained relationship with Russell, and ex-husband Terrence Fraser, who might have financial grievances against Rebecca. Investigators approached Terrence, a church pastor, to learn more about his recent interactions with Rebecca. Unlike Robert, Terrence appears genuinely distressed from the start and seems deeply saddened by Rebecca's disappearance. His behavior stood in stark contrast to Robert's and showed no signs of recent conflict. Terrence had moved on with his life and appeared content, expressing sincere regret over the disagreements during their divorce. He admitted he could have been kinder at times and acknowledged his past mistakes with genuine remorse. The police continued to stay in contact with Rebecca's and Russell's relatives and friends during the investigation. One of Russell's friends shared some intriguing information. The family's property had been targeted by multiple crimes in the past. This suggested they might have had more enemies than anyone had realized. For instance, a few months before the disappearance, there had been an incident of agricultural theft on their farm. In response, Russell had installed video cameras on the property. Robert was also investigated for possible involvement. However, it was confirmed that he couldn't have committed the crime during that time because he was far from the city. Despite this, his intense dislike for Russell raised suspicions that he might have orchestrated the crime. At the time of the incident, Robert was working as a truck driver and was traveling to Texas. Separately, Terrence was also ruled out as a suspect through further checks. This led to the theory that the Porters might have had other, less obvious enemies unknown to the police. Eventually, the investigation appeared to hit a dead end. About a week after Russell and Rebecca disappeared, an unexpected development occurred. Early one morning, the station received a call reporting that Donald and Helen Willingham had been found stabbed to death in their home. The police immediately noticed several similarities between this case and the Porters. Both homes were broken into without warning, nothing of value was stolen, and the level of brutality was extreme. However, unlike the first incident, the bodies in this case were not removed, nor was there an attempt to clean up the crime scene. The reason? A neighbor had frightened the perpetrator. The witness even chased a man wearing a black hoodie for a short while but failed to catch him. The suspect managed to escape, but the neighbor promptly reported the incident to the police around 5 a.m. The investigation into the second case revealed troubling parallels. The Willingham family bore a striking resemblance to the Porters. Both women, Helen and Rebecca, were actively involved in their local church. Helen was married to Donald, the local church pastor, just as Rebecca had once been. This raised fears of a possible serial killer or a connection between the two families. Despite intense efforts by law enforcement, progress in both investigations was limited. The police thoroughly examined the relatives of the Willingham family, their close acquaintances, and the timeline leading up to the crime. As in the case of the Porter family, several suspects were identified, but each was ruled out after further questioning. Both cases appeared to be at a standstill until July 2011, when the situation took a turn. In that month, a man named Jose Huckleberry was taken into custody at the station, accused of committing a burglary in Greene County. During a 7-hour interrogation, he confessed to killing Donald and Helen but denied having any role in the disappearance of Rebecca and Russell. Eventually, investigators confirmed he could not have been responsible for the Porters' disappearance, as he had a solid alibi. Both the cases of the Porter family and the Willingham family exhibit striking similarities and notable differences, particularly regarding the motives and methods of the murderer. As a result, Jose was removed from the list of suspects in the Porters family case. Later, a police informant who had recently been released from prison claimed to possess valuable information regarding the disappearance of Rebecca and Russell. The informant stated that a prisoner named Tony had boasted during a conversation that he took away the birthdays of Rebecca and Russell, a phrase in criminal slang meaning that he killed them. Although the detectives were skeptical of this claim, they decided it was worth continuing to investigate the lead. The police began investigating Tony. They first reviewed the location data from his mobile phone to determine whether he might have been near the Porters family's residence on the night of their disappearance. In parallel, they delved into Tony's background. The inquiry revealed that he had a history of burglary, primarily targeting electronics and household appliances. Notably, his criminal patterns seemed to align with the theft of items from the Porter family's home, including a computer system unit, potentially linking him to the case. At the time of the investigation, Tony was in jail awaiting charges for another burglary. Detectives arranged to speak with him directly, but Tony denied any involvement in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. The family recounted Tony's tumultuous past, claiming that he had experienced problems from a young age. He had consistently found himself in trouble and had been connected to the criminal world since his school years. Investigators interviewed Tony's family and uncovered a long-standing conflict among the family members. Some relatives hadn't seen Tony for years and were unaware of his circumstances. Others, like his cousin Dusty Hicks, remained in contact and actively cooperated with the investigation. Eventually, Tony revealed he might have information about a crime involving the Porters. He told the police he could lead them to a location where the Porters' bodies might be hidden, an old hut in the forest. Tony led the police to the site. As they neared the hut, a foul odor grew stronger. Once inside, the smell was overwhelming. In the floorboards, they found a hole concealing a grave filled with garbage and human remains. By this time, 3 months had passed since Rebecca and Russell had gone missing, and the condition of the bodies was severely deteriorated. Identification wasn't immediately possible, and forensic examination was necessary to confirm the victims' identities. Experts have confirmed, through dental records and DNA analysis, that the bodies belonged to Rebecca and Russell. The case was reclassified from a disappearance to a double murder. Investigators concluded that they had been attacked in the head at close range with a weapon. They was found wearing pajamas, suggesting they were likely attacked during the night or early morning while sleeping. It's strange when bodies are found deep in the forest, far from their homes. This area is difficult to access, and for a long time, the question arose, how could a stranger know about this place? The truth was later revealed. Tony's cousin, Dusty Hicks, was an accomplice. Dusty disclosed that Tony was part of a gang, which included several of his childhood friends. They often commit crimes, mainly by breaking into houses and stealing to unlawfully benefit from others' property. Until the Porter family's murders, the gang had no history of violent crimes. Dusty revealed that he, Tony, Wendy Friend, Tony's wife, and their son, Philip, were involved in the massacre. Investigators decided to examine their phone records. Suspicious messages were discovered between Tony, Wendy, Philip, and Dusty. On April 18, 2011, they were near the Porter's family house, but their devices were switched off a few hundred meters away from the farm. The suspects confessed during interrogation that a specific customer had offered them $100,000 to carry out a double murder. Tony, the oldest and most experienced among them, influenced Philip and the others to join the criminal plan, driven by the promise of money. According to their statements, they prepared by wrapping their hands in a special adhesive film to avoid leaving fingerprints. Before heading to the Porter's farm, they bought a can of bleach, which they later used to wipe away evidence at the crime scene. To disable the CCTV system, they cut the wires, triggering an alarm. After cutting through a fence, they entered the house through a window. Tony carried a weapon, while the others assisted him. He went into Rebecca and Russell's bedroom, brandished the weapon at them, who had awakened, and instructed the accomplices to restrain them using plastic ties. They were then abducted and taken away in a pickup truck to an isolated forest area. Rebecca and Russell were left near a cabin in the woods, where their bodies were later discovered. Philip, one of the suspects, disclosed that Tony and Dusty led them deeper into the forest. Approximately 10 minutes later, he heard the sound of weapons exploding, followed a few minutes later by another explosion, signaling the deaths of Rebecca and Russell. Their bodies were buried hastily in a makeshift grave. The perpetrators returned to the Porter's family home to clean up the crime scene and stole a computer containing footage from the CCTV cameras to eliminate incriminating evidence. The police focused on the person who ordered the crime, someone willing to pay $100,000 to kill 2 innocent people. Tony eventually revealed a name, Robert Campbell. It made sense to the investigators, as Robert, Russell's uncle, had more than one motive. He wanted revenge for being evicted, but there was something deeper. Russell and Rebecca knew a terrible secret about him, though the exact details were never revealed. Russell and Rebecca suspected that Robert was involved in illegal activities, specifically selling stolen equipment. They had gathered evidence and were planning to report him to the police. To prevent this, Robert turned to his friend Tony, who organized a group to carry out the murders. The entire gang was eventually arrested. Although Robert denied any involvement, insisting that he hadn't done it, the police dismissed his claims. The prosecutor charged all 5 individuals involved. Tony Friend admitted guilt in 2 counts of first-degree murder and received a life sentence without parole. Dusty Hicks was sentenced to 2 life terms. Wendy Friend also received a life sentence. Philip Friend cooperated with authorities, testifying against the others, which led to a reduced sentence. Robert Campbell went to trial, and despite the evidence being circumstantial, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. Even Robert's wife, Carolyn, faced potential prosecution for aiding him in committing perjury, but she ended her life before any charges could be filed. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lizzie Marriott. Lizzie Marriott, a 19-year-old college student, went missing on October 9, 2012, after attending her classes. Before leaving, she left a note for her aunt and uncle, Tony and Becky Hanna, with whom she was staying. In the note, Lizzie said she was visiting a friend and would return before midnight. However, she did not return that night or the next day. Her car was later found in the school parking lot, but she was nowhere to be found. The investigation into her disappearance eventually turned to the search for her body. Police discovered that a group of people were involved in her death. Lizzie became a favorite member of Tony and Becky's family, moving in with them to save on housing costs while she attended the University of New Hampshire. She has always had a passion for marine animals, which inspired her to pursue a career in marine biology. In the fall of 2012, Lizzie moved away from her parents, Bob and Melissa Marriott, in Massachusetts to start a new life in Chester. Despite the 2-hour drive, they remained close and kept in touch. Lizzie's gentle, kind, and sweet nature made her a lovable person, and her presence brought joy to those around her. Tony and Becky remember her warm greeting, "I'm home," which filled their hearts with love and happiness whenever she returned to their home. As Lizzie settled into her new life, she worked at Target in her spare time, where she quickly adapted and built a good reputation. Lizzie met 18-year-old Kate McDonald, and the two quickly became friends, often hanging out after work. One evening, Kate invites Lizzie to her apartment for dinner and a movie. Lizzie agrees. However, their plans for a quiet evening are disrupted when Kate's 30-year-old boyfriend, Seth Mazzaglia, joins them. Lizzie doesn't mind Seth's surprise appearance, thinking it would be more fun to have a friend. Moreover, her new acquaintances are interesting people related to the theater. And Seth graduated from the same university as Lizzie but majored in theater arts. With many of the same interests, the evening looks like it will be a lot of fun. However, Lizzie doesn't know that her decision to enter the apartment that night will be a fateful one, as she will never leave again. Lizzie's relatives wait until the next evening, thinking that she may have stayed overnight with a friend before going to college. However, when she did not appear on October 10th, her aunt and uncle became worried and contacted her parents. But her parents had no information about her whereabouts. After receiving the news, Lizzie's mother and father immediately drove to Chester, reporting her missing to the police along the way. The search for Lizzie involved not only the police and her relatives, but also her friends. To begin the investigation, everyone who knew her was questioned. Although her relatives were unsure of her whereabouts, her friends were able to provide some information. A friend named Nate Michael said he knew where she might be and pointed to Kate McDonald. The police took note of this and began to follow up on new leads. Meanwhile, it was discovered that there was no activity on Lizzie's bank account and her phone was turned off. This ruled out the initial possibility that she had been in an accident. The investigation took a significant turn when her car was found just a few days later. At the same time, Bob and Melissa Marriott announced a $10,000 reward for information about their missing daughter. After speaking with Lizzie's friends and acquaintances, the police discovered some surprising details about Lizzie's coworker, Kate, and her boyfriend Seth Mazzaglia. It was clear that the couple was not what they appeared to be in public. Seth was later arrested. Lizzie and Kate's acquaintances revealed that the two girls had been spending a lot of time together recently, but their personalities and attitudes towards life seemed different. Lizzie was known to be friendly and compassionate, while Kate was often described as reserved and rude. However, employees at the store noticed a change in Kate's behavior after she started dating Seth, suggesting that she had been influenced by his bad traits over time. She had undergone significant changes, losing her previous carefree and bubbly personality. Unbeknownst to them, she had also begun to distance herself from relatives who disapproved of her new boyfriend. The couple began dating when Seth was 17, and after she turned 18, they moved in together at Mel's apartment in Dover, New Hampshire. Police kept a close eye on the couple and conducted background checks but found nothing unusual. While studying the young couple's online profiles, officers discovered details about their personal lives. Seth and Kate had an unusual relationship. On a website, Kate, using the pseudonym Miss Scarlet, a vampire actress, posted an ad. She wrote that she and her partner were looking for a live-in maid. Required duties included cleaning the house, washing dishes, laundry, cooking, and being available for sex at any time. Kate also shared information about herself and her partner, describing their relationship as dominant and submissive, with the former giving orders and controlling while the latter completely submitted to his will. Kate had attached photos of herself in a Gothic style to the post. It was clear that their relationship was not based on love and mutual respect, but on humiliation and submission. The couple practiced a form of bondage, discipline, dominance, and submission, with Seth as the dominant partner and Kate as the submissive. This discovery led the police to strongly suspect that they might be involved in Lizzie's disappearance. On October 12, the police interviewed Kate and Seth. The police separated them to gather information more effectively. For 2 hours, Kate insisted that she had not seen Lizzie on October 9th. Then she refused to talk altogether. Seth, on the other hand, provided more details, confirming that Lizzie had been at their house that day. According to Seth, the evening involved watching movies, playing strip poker, and then having consensual sex with 2 women. During this intimate encounter, Seth claimed that he had tied the women up with rope, but the situation turned tragic, resulting in Lizzie's accidental death. Then, in a state of shock and fear of being misunderstood, he and Kate took the girl's body to Pierce Island and threw it into the Piscataqua River. They then went home. After an 11-hour interrogation, Seth took police to the location where he said he dumped Lizzie's body, reenacting the scene where he threw her off the cliff. He was later charged with murder on October 13th. The news of their daughter's death was devastating to Melissa and Bob Marriott. A candlelight vigil was held in Lizzie's memory that same day. At the vigil, Bob expressed his gratitude to those in attendance and hoped that the collective prayer would bring Lizzie peace. He described his daughter as an angel who had gone to heaven. Her friend Nate, who was actively involved in the search for Lizzie, remembered her as always telling funny stories to lift the spirits or comfort others during difficult times. He sadly wondered if she would ever find the right words to comfort them in her current situation. However, Lizzie's parents refused to accept the circumstances of her death as Seth described. Her parents asked the police to find their daughter's body as soon as possible so they could say goodbye and give her a proper burial. The search for Lizzie continued, with the cooperation of volunteers and police. However, the river where Lizzie's body was dumped was subject to strong currents, and it is likely that she had drifted into the Atlantic Ocean. The investigation expanded to include a thorough search of Seth and Kate's apartment and the surrounding area. Police found that their apartment was unclean and very messy. They also discovered that Seth had an interest in occultism and black magic. Since no evidence was found in the apartment, forensic experts examined the surrounding area, including the trash cans. In one of the bins, they found a bag containing a sweatshirt, black leather gloves, and men's underwear. After an autopsy, underwear was found to contain DNA from both Seth and Lizzie, confirming their intimate relationship. Police also found a sweater that was identified by Lizzie's family as hers. On October 17th, Kate gave her statement after a period of silence. She described a get-together with Lizzie on October 9th. The evening began as a movie night but then turned into a game of strip poker. During the game, they became excited and decided to have sex, with all parties allegedly consenting. According to Kate, the interactions began with affectionate touches and kisses before Seth suggested tying Lizzie up with rope, an idea she agreed to. Kate even reenacted Seth tying Lizzie up with rope. Everything was going well, but suddenly Lizzie had a seizure. She began having difficulty breathing, and a few minutes later, she passed out. When Seth and Kate lifted the girl up, she stopped breathing. It all happened quickly and unexpectedly. Kate claimed that no one was responsible for what happened, it was an accident. However, a crucial testimony later emerged, shedding further light on the case. One day, a young woman came to the police station, claiming that she had important information about the Lizzie Marriott case. She asked to speak to the police officer leading the investigation. During the conversation, the woman introduced herself as Catherine Fish, Seth's ex-girlfriend. As she shared her story, she hinted that Seth was capable of murder. She revealed that, during their relationship, he had once confessed to her that in one of his fantasies, he had taken someone's life. Catherine and Seth met about 10 years ago. Initially, Seth appeared to be a charming and attentive man, showering Catherine with attention, flowers, and gifts. He was charming in conversation, and Catherine quickly fell in love with him. However, things took an unexpected turn during their first intimate encounter, when Catherine discovered that Seth enjoyed physical violence. Although Catherine was initially willing to explore new experiences as long as Seth remained in control, she soon became uncomfortable as Seth's behavior became increasingly cruel and aggressive. Seth would occasionally share his disturbing thoughts and fantasies with Catherine, which only made her increasingly anxious. One particularly unpleasant conversation led Catherine to a terrifying realization: Seth could be a danger to her. This fear was soon confirmed when Seth, in a fit of aggression, grabbed Catherine by the neck, squeezing despite her desperate pleas to let go. Catherine's life became increasingly uncomfortable after her boyfriend, Seth, brought home several different girls, claiming that they needed a third, long-term partner to spice up their relationship. Catherine's life became hell. She admitted that Seth scared her so much that she didn't dare to escape. After a few months, she finally got the courage to run away. Catherine miraculously traveled 1,000 miles to her parents' house, never to see her ex-boyfriend again. In May 2014, Seth appeared in court on charges including attempted murder. Several witnesses testified against him, including Kate McDonald, who was arrested 2 months after Lizzie's death on charges of obstruction of justice and obstruction of justice. While in custody, Kate had plenty of time to reflect on her actions and the person she was protecting. Initially, she and Seth maintained an active correspondence while she was behind bars. The pair shared romantic visions of escaping together and fleeing to a country without extradition laws where they could marry and start a family. However, their escape plan hit a snag. Seth convinced his soon-to-be-released cellmate, Ryan Bachman, to assist in the plan. Ryan was given access to Seth's bank account and instructed to withdraw money, buy drugs with the money, and then sell the drugs to increase his initial capital. The plan was to use the extra money to buy various items, including guns, 2 cars, explosives, and a boat. However, Ryan decided to use the money for his own purposes and the police soon discovered the plan. Seth therefore abandoned his escape plan and sent Kate a letter, suggesting that they would meet in the afterlife, hinting at the possibility that death was not the end of life. Some interpreted this as a suggestion for Kate to end her life. Over time, Kate's thinking became clearer, and when the prosecutor's office offered her a favorable deal in 2014, she accepted without hesitation. The deal required Kate to give a truthful account of the events that occurred on the evening of October 9th in the apartment. In return, her potential 20-year prison sentence was reduced to 3 years. Kate said that after she started a relationship with Seth, she was terrified of him and did everything he told her to do. Over time, Seth took control of her life, suppressed her free will, and made her dependent on him. A month and a half before Lizzie's death, Seth sent her a text message, asking her to find another partner as soon as possible because he didn't want to be alone while she was away on a 10-day theatrical tour. However, Kate was unable to find anyone to replace her. Over time, Seth's messages became more aggressive, shifting from commands to threats. He warned her that if she didn't follow his instructions, she would face serious consequences. At the very least, Seth wanted her to bring a friend to spend time with so he could pursue his plans. To fulfill his request, Kate invites her friend Lizzie, as Lizzie has been to Kate's house before and trusts her. Lizzie is unaware that Seth planned this and is happy that she is the chosen partner, as he has seen her pictures before. To ensure that Lizzie will come without hesitation, Kate does not tell her that they will have Seth join them. Lizzie arrives at Kate's apartment on October 9th at 9 p.m. Initially, Kate and Lizzie socialize while Seth joins in later, creating a lively atmosphere with his jokes and interest in the girls. When they move on to watch a movie, Seth suggests a strip card game, which adds an intimate atmosphere to the scene. The game goes normally, but Lizzie is losing, so she strips in her underwear for another losing game. Seth suggested kissing Lizzie, but the girl refused, explaining that she had a boyfriend and that disgusted her. After a while, Seth asked Lizzie to be alone, and she replied no. In response, Seth angrily left the room, put on a pair of black leather gloves, and grabbed a rope. He then returned, sat down behind Lizzie, and quickly wrapped the rope around her neck. Lizzie was taken by surprise and had no time to react. Seth had strangled her without hesitation. He then desecrated the victim's body. During the whole process, Kate sat nearby, frozen in fear. She was afraid that she would be the next victim, so she did nothing to help poor Lizzie. Around 1 a.m., the couple put Lizzie's body in a suitcase after wrapping it in a tarp and some pollen. They transported the suitcase to Lizzie's car and drove to Pierce Island, which was located by the river. Once on the island, they took the suitcase to an observation deck and took the body out, throwing it over the cliff. After dumping the body, the couple cleaned up in the car, then drove to the school and left Lizzie's car in the parking lot. From there, they walked about 10 miles home. Kate later explained that she was very scared and shocked during the whole process. She later refused to testify against Seth because she was afraid he would hurt her. During the trial, the girl appeared to be in pain, crying continuously, but not shedding a single tear. Because of this, many in the courtroom doubted her sincerity. They believed that she might be a talented actress, and that she could easily fake her pain. The defense took note of this and argued that the girl's emotional display was fabricated. Meanwhile, both the defense and the prosecution agreed that the couple disposed of Lizzie's body after she died. However, they disagreed on the circumstances surrounding the death. Seth's defense argued that the victim, Lizzie, died as a result of an accident during an intimate encounter. Kate's defense, on the other hand, claimed that the death was intentional, and asserted that Kate had been under great pressure from Seth, who isolated her from her family and friends and forced her into intimate relationships. This, according to the defense, had a significant impact on her mental state. The prosecution, on the other hand, focused on proving that the crime was an act of intentional homicide. They presented the discovery of the gloves as crucial evidence, which they alleged showed that Seth had tried to cover his tracks. According to the prosecution, Seth was aware of what he had done. The prosecution's witnesses also included Roberta Gherkin and Paul Hickok, acquaintances of the couple. It turned out that at 10:49 p.m., after Lizzie's death, Seth called them. He said he needed help and asked them to come. After 11 p.m., the couple went to Seth's apartment, where they witnessed a disturbing scene, Seth sitting on the bed next to a girl in lingerie. When Paul asked about the situation, Seth repeatedly said, "This time it's gone too far." Roberta discovered Kate curled up on the kitchen floor. Upon witnessing this, the couple urged Seth to call an ambulance and quickly left the scene. They chose not to intervene or contact the police to avoid any further trouble. Seth Mazzaglia, 32, was convicted of first-degree murder by strangulation and conspiracy on August 14, 2014. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. His co-defendant, Kate McDonald, 20, was sentenced to 3 years in prison. After her release in 2016, Kate lived a fairly private life, with many believing she had returned to her parents' home. Tragically, Lizzie Marriott's body was never found. Her parents, Bob and Melissa, created a memorial bench in their hometown to honor their daughter. While they accept that justice has been served in part through Seth's sentencing, they find it difficult to accept the leniency of Kate McDonald's sentence, claiming that their daughter will never return. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Josh Niles. In 2018, a young couple, Josh Niles and Amber Washburn, moved to Carlton Street in the small town of Sodus, New York, population about 8,000. Josh, then 28, grew up in Newark, Wayne County, in a family of 5 siblings. Amber, 4 years younger than Josh, had been dating him for years, but they had never officially married. Josh had 2 children from a previous marriage, and his 2 children currently lived with him and Amber. In addition, the couple raised another child together, named Joshua Jr. Amber got along well with her boyfriend's children and treated them like family. Life went on as usual. Josh had saved some money and was planning to start a small business. Amber took care of the children and was also planning to find a job. The couple wanted to get married and live a happy family life. But this story will not have a happy ending. At approximately 2 p.m. on October 22, 2018, Josh Niles left his home to go to work. He started his car and pulled into his driveway, then noticed a man sitting on a bench near his house. He realized the man was waiting for him, so Josh went outside to meet the stranger. According to neighbors who happened to notice the 2 men, they talked for a while and both appeared to be very stressed. Then, gunshots rang out. The stranger shot Josh. At the same time, Amber was returning to the house and backing into the house. Minutes after Josh was murdered, the attacker fled. Josh was now lying on the ground, bleeding profusely. Amber sat in the car and screamed her boyfriend's name. Suddenly, the attacker shot through the windshield of the car, hitting Amber in the head. It all happened so fast that Amber, who witnessed the attack, had no time to escape, although she tried to hide. A neighbor who witnessed the incident quickly ran home when she heard the gunshots. Not knowing where the gunshots came from, she closed the door and prayed for it to end quickly. Then everything became quiet. The distraught neighbor quickly called 911 to report the shooting. Patrol officers arrived shortly after and found Josh's body next to his car, where he had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the chest. They discovered Amber's car when the officers checked on Amber, who was also dead, and in the back seat was her 4-year-old son, Joshua Jr., eating McDonald's fried chicken. The autistic child did not understand what had happened. The important thing was that he was alive. The other children suddenly disappeared from both the car and the house. Where could they have gone? It was later discovered that they were at school and safe. During the investigation of the crime scene, the police found approximately 13 spent shell casings. Josh had been shot 12 times and Amber had suffered a fatal head injury. It was clear that the attacker was primarily targeting Josh and that Amber may have been killed simply because she witnessed the incident. Most witnesses did not realize that they had heard gunshots, mistaking them for fireworks. However, some eyewitness accounts have been proven valid. They described the attacker as a man dressed in black clothing and wearing a green hat. Unfortunately, his face was obscured and could not be seen from a distance. After the shooting, the suspect fled through the backyards of nearby homes without a vehicle. Police quickly began interviewing anyone who may have seen a man matching that description and are also searching for surveillance camera footage in the area to gather more information about the attack. Due to insufficient information, authorities decided to close the nearest school, and the police deployed search dogs, suspecting that the fugitive might still be in the vicinity. The search lasted several hours but did not result in finding the attacker. The investigation led police to a remote parking lot where the lights were off. It is believed that the criminal entered a car and drove away, making it impossible for the dogs to track any scent further. The only evidence discovered by detectives was a ski mask found in a trash can at the parking lot. Neighbors of the victims reported seeing a man wearing a similar mask fleeing the scene, but he also had a hood on, preventing them from identifying any facial features. Witnesses noted that this man had been seen in the area prior to the shooting, behaving cautiously as if he were watching someone. The locals were frightened. This was the first time something like this had happened in their quiet, peaceful town. They worried that the criminal, still at large, might endanger others. However, the police believed this was a targeted attack and that the criminal did not pose a threat to the wider community. They worked to reassure the public and recognized that their top priority was to find and arrest the attacker to ensure the city's safety. They committed all their resources to this effort. Police determined that this was not a random act, like a robbery, but a targeted attack. The criminal knew Amber and Josh by name. The attacker was also a skilled marksman, accurately shooting Josh with the first shot. But who would want to harm this young couple? Police began looking into the family's acquaintances and friends to identify potential suspects. The first people to raise suspicions were Josh's ex-wife, Charlene Childers, and her husband, Tim Dean. Josh and Charlene's first marriage was unsuccessful. Josh, at 16, met Charlene through a mutual friend, and they quickly started dating. When Charlene faced issues at home, she moved in with Josh and his parents. In July 2009, they had a daughter, got married, and moved into their own home. 5 years later, they welcomed another child. However, their relationship was tumultuous. Josh was obstinate, and Charlene often instigated arguments. They frequently fought, which ultimately led to their divorce. Afterwards, Charlene relocated with their children to San Ray, Texas. Post-divorce, a custody battle ensued, with both parents vying for full custody of the children. Soon after moving to Texas, Charlene remarried James Childers, but that marriage ended in divorce shortly thereafter. She then entered a relationship with Tim Dean, whom she later married. Tim displayed abusive behavior, becoming violent towards both Charlene and her children. Not long before a tragic incident, Tim physically assaulted Charlene's daughter. When the girl refused to eat one day, Tim struck her in the face, an event that was recorded by his wife, who dismissed it at the time. Subsequently, the video was shared on social media, reaching Josh, the child's father. Josh reported the situation to the police, leading to an investigation that confirmed his claims. Tim was arrested and charged with child abuse. As a result, the children of Josh and Charlene were returned to their father, Josh, due to Tim's abusive behavior and Charlene's lack of action. It seemed likely that Josh would gain full custody of the children. Their lives appeared to be improving until October 2018, when tragedy struck. During this time, a heated argument erupted between Josh and Charlene over custody of the children. Police contacted Charlene, who was in Texas at the time and could not have participated in the attack on the couple. She learned about the incident through social media, where she found news reports about the attack. Charlene was initially concerned for her children but was relieved to learn that they were safe. She maintained that she had nothing to do with the crime as she had not been near the location of the incident. Her alibi was verified, leading the police to remove her from the list of suspects. Relatives of the victims, Josh and Amber, were shocked by the news. They quickly provided vital information to the police, suspecting that Josh's ex-wife, Charlene, and her husband were involved as they had frequently argued with Josh and had made threats against him. They believed that no one else could have committed the crime, noting that the attack was clearly personal. At the same time, forensic experts were meticulously investigating the crime scene and comparing gathered evidence. It became clear that the Josh and the shooter had a prior relationship, as they had spoken before the attack, and the shooter knew Amber's name. The police suspected the murder was premeditated, especially since neighbors reported seeing the shooter waiting for the couple and noted that nothing was stolen despite 12 shots being fired. Josh's neighbors and friends say that Josh and Amber, although new to the area, were polite and friendly, but his ex-wife Charlene described Josh differently. She described him as unpredictable and capable of using violence during arguments. Charlene also mentioned that he had issues with drugs. The police verified this information, finding archived records that showed he had smoked in his youth. Despite these revelations, Charlene supported the father of her children and felt outraged that someone had taken him from them. Her statements about drug use led police to form new theories. They considered the possibility that someone with serious addictions could become involved in criminal activities, making the shooting potentially related to a drug dispute. It has been speculated that he may have been in debt to drug dealers, but these theories have never been confirmed. A toxicology report found no alcohol or drugs in the murdered couple's systems. Their relatives claim that they did not use any substances, and no evidence of drugs was found in their home. After reviewing the couple's text messages and phone calls, police concluded that they had no connection to drug dealers, making this theory seem unlikely. The police then focused on Josh's close associates and found no suspicious individuals. All the evidence pointed to Charlene, who married Tim in 2018. They began investigating Tim and his possible involvement in the crime. It was discovered that Tim and Charlene had met while working in Texas, Charlene working at an animal rescue service and Tim working at the police department. Tim quickly begins a romance with Charlene, but he is known to be aggressive and has a troubled past, leading some to suspect he may have committed murder. His history of child abuse further tarnishes his reputation. Surprisingly, Tim Dean was previously a police chief in Texas but was fired in disgrace after an incident involving a child. With his reputation damaged, he struggles to find new employment and eventually takes a job delivering fast food. At the same time, rumors spread that Tim wanted revenge for being fired from the police, specifically targeting Josh, who had caused him trouble. Meanwhile, Charlene had a chance to regain custody of her children from her previous marriage. There was a lawsuit to settle the custody dispute, but Charlie was determined not to back down. She wanted children and was willing to fight Josh in court. In August 2018, she traveled to New York, where the court informed her that she would not be awarded custody while she was married and living with Tim Dean, a man accused of abuse. She promised to divorce Tim for the sake of the children, which brought more attention to him from the police. Not only did Tim lose his job, he also faced the possibility of losing his wife, his home, and everything he had worked for over the years. He may have had a motive for killing Josh, to get revenge and gain custody of his wife's children. Additionally, he had no alibi at the time of the murder, making him the prime suspect. However, strong evidence was needed to arrest and prosecute. The police began gathering more information and obtained a search warrant and wiretapped Tim's phone calls, which led to the discovery of crucial information. It turns out that just before the shooting, Tim had an accident 400 kilometers from New York in a rental car, all in Kansas. Tim Dean made it to New York, but it was completely unclear why he was there and why he disappeared so quickly. This made him even more suspicious. After the attack, police discovered the crash and traced Tim's rental car to a mechanic who towed it after the incident. The mechanic reported that when he repaired the car, he found multiple magazines containing various caliber bullets, a handgun, and a bulletproof vest in the trunk. The black bulletproof vest, which lacked armor inserts and was typically used for sport shooting or hunting, had pockets and ammunition pouches. The police viewed surveillance footage from car rental companies. Tim went to several car rental companies and rented a car from one. He paid in cash, which the company refused to accept, drawing attention to him for being refused. Tim chose to rent a car instead of using his own, and the fact that he paid in cash aroused the police's suspicions. It appeared that, as an experienced police officer, he had gone to great lengths to conceal his actions, but still left a trail of evidence from the accident, where his real name was revealed. This gave the police reason to arrest him and conduct a more thorough investigation into Tim's involvement in the murder. Tim Dean was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. He shared a very unbelievable statement about wanting to take a long trip to work things out with Charlene after they had a disagreement. He mentioned that he went to New York to talk to her uncle, hoping that he could help mend their relationship. However, Tim did not confirm that he had ever met Josh and Amber, the victims of the case. Despite the many coincidences, all of the police's suspicions were not confirmed, as there was too little information and Tim denied any involvement in the case. The police were forced to release Tim, but they continued to investigate the information. Tim Dean rented a car for his trip under the name of his friend and former colleague, Bron Bowler, instead of his own. This led police to question Bron. During questioning, Bron claimed that he had no knowledge of Tim's plans and was only helping a friend. However, the police suspected that he was not being completely honest and urged him to share any information he might have. The police warned Bron that if Tim was convicted and it was discovered that Bron had concealed important information, he could be considered an accomplice and face serious consequences. To verify his honesty, the police planned to use a lie detector, but Bron failed. He then revealed to the police that there was a double murder plot being carried out at Tim Dean's home. The two experienced police officers meticulously planned the details to avoid detection and escape responsibility for the crime. During the investigation, it was decided to rent a car for Tim through a friend, without his name on any documents to avoid detection. The plan almost worked. The former cop planned to get to New York while avoiding attention. However, his plan was ruined by an accident. Charlene, the ex-wife of Josh the man who was shot, was also involved in the plot. Tim Dean was charged with committing the crime for her benefit. After losing custody of their children, Charlene became the driving force behind the crime. According to Ron's testimony, she informed Tim that Josh and Amber needed to be removed so that her life could return to normal. She also used her credit card to provide additional money to rent a second car. Since Tim only had cash, which was not accepted by businesses in Kansas, it was clear that Charlene was complicit in the crime after he fled the scene of the accident. 2 weeks after the double murder, the suspects were arrested and faced 6 charges, including first-degree murder, second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and illegal possession of a weapon. Charlene was charged with manslaughter and illegal possession of a weapon, while Bron was charged with being an accessory. Charlene confessed to the crime and cooperated with police in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. However, her help was insignificant, as police had enough evidence to file charges. Notably, a ski mask found by the dogs contained Tim's DNA, which was confirmed by forensic analysis. Tim Dean, the shooter, consistently claimed he was innocent, but ultimately, he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, hearings, and sentencing, Tim remained calm and showed no signs of regret or remorse. He did not engage with the victim's family at all. Tim is currently serving his sentence at Clinton Correctional Facility in New York State. Braun Bowler, who was involved in the case, received a 3-year sentence but was released after serving 16 months. Charlene was convicted and sentenced to prison. However, because she assisted the police, her sentence was reduced to 28 years, far less than the maximum possible sentence. She is eligible for parole in 2042 and is currently incarcerated at the Belford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York. Charlene's sister received custody of her 2 children, and Amber's parents received custody of the deceased couple's son. Out that the boy had autism, so the grandparents had to learn to raise a special child. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of David Camm. David Camm was born in 1964 in Albany, Indiana, USA. He grew up to be a healthy and famous young man, especially popular with women. In 1984, he met Kimberly Wren, a beautiful woman who instantly captured his heart. The two quickly realized their feelings for each other. Nevertheless, their love was complicated by the fact that David was already married to his high school sweetheart. From his marriage, he had a daughter, but he began a secret relationship with Kimberly. Eventually, this affair was discovered, leading to his divorce. 3 years later, David and Kimberly got married. Kimberly believed she had found the love of her life and hoped to spend forever with him. Unfortunately, David was not the perfect husband she thought he was. Only 3 years after the wedding day, David met a new woman, Stephanie McCarthy, at the fitness center where he regularly trained. They initially developed a close friendship that endured. Even after David had a son, Bradley, from his marriage to Kimberly in 1993. During this time, David maintained friendly relations with the fitness trainer, Stephanie. For 2 years, David and Stephanie's connection remained platonic, partly because Stephanie had a lover at the time, but the attraction between them was evident. After Stephanie broke up with her lover in 1994, David seized the opportunity to ask her out. Without hesitation, he made his intentions clear and went public with the affair, openly taking Stephanie to car races, restaurants, and a nightclub. Kimberly began to suspect her husband David was being unfaithful while she was pregnant with their second child. When confronted, David admitted to having an affair with his fitness trainer. This thing led to the demise of their marriage. At 5 months pregnant, Kimberly asked David to move out of their home. He called his mother to see if he could move back in, but she refused, causing him to become furious. His parents' failure to help him, instead siding with Kimberly, left David feeling rejected. As the conversation escalated, David started smashing the kitchen, prompting his mother to call the police. Despite the police being called, they did not take any action against David due to his being a colleague. Instead, they advised him to calm down and avoid tarnishing the reputation of the police force. The marriage eventually ended, and David moved into a new apartment, where his new girlfriend Stephanie joined him, even though she had her own place. This move further alienated David from his relatives, who sided with Kimberly and were appalled by his betrayal. David filed for divorce right when Kimberly, his pregnant wife, needed him most, as she was about to give birth to their second child. Their baby girl, Jill, was born on February 28, 1995. On the day of the birth, David was absent. Instead, David's parents were there to provide support to Kimberly, who had been left alone by her husband. David's new relationship with Stephanie was also short-lived. It ended in March 1995 when he found out that she had been secretly meeting her ex-boyfriend at the gym where she worked. To David's dismay, Stephanie had been developing feelings for her ex again. David initially suspected something when Stephanie began disappearing on dates, and eventually, he discovered the truth. When he confronted Stephanie after she returned home late from work, he became enraged. Feeling betrayed, David pulled out his 9mm pistol, threatening to harm her and then himself. Luckily, he was talked out of doing something reckless. After this tumultuous confrontation, Stephanie left David, and it became clear that she had gone back to her ex-boyfriend, ending their relationship. Following his introspective moment, David reached out to his ex-wife Kimberly to apologize for past mistakes. To his surprise, she was still emotionally invested in him and chose to forgive him. As it happened, Kimberly was going through a difficult time and needed support, creating a perfect opportunity for David to make amends and rekindle their relationship. David took the opportunity, he packed his belongings and moved back in with Kimberly, and also managed to improve his relationship with his parents. They were pleased to see their son think things through and subsequently offered their renewed support. Kimberly later started a well-paying job at an insurance company, while David left his position as a police officer, despite having over 10 years of experience. He transitioned to working with his uncle at a waterproofing store. Turns out, he quit being a police officer not by accident. The real reason comes from the fact that he already has many stains on his record, due to facing many complaints of inappropriate behavior. David changed careers and found that his new job as a store employee actually paid more than his previous role as a patrol officer. His uncle's success in the store likely contributed to this positive change. David and his wife, Kimberly, were able to fulfill their long-held dream of building a home in Georgetown, Indiana. This new house symbolized the healing of their relationship and indicated that everything was going well again. It felt as though life had finally returned to normal. The family was happy in many ways, and David's transformation played a significant role in this. Kimberly noticed that he had changed for the better. He started spending much more time with their son and daughter. However, this positive change only scratched the surface. The reality is David's struggle with addiction to a carefree lifestyle was still present. In 1997, he met an old friend, Michelle, and he secretly began an affair. They would meet in the back seat of his car, but the relationship ended quickly when Michelle learned about David's marriage and children. However, David did not give up and quickly found another love interest. Her name was Lisa, the girlfriend of one of David's friends. David would repeat the same pattern over and over again. He is constantly looking for new lovers, ignoring Kimberly's parents' requests that he change his ways. David was assertive, and also had a short temper, and would become angry if his advances were rejected. However, he would quickly lose interest in the women he pursued and move on to someone new. This dissolute behavior went on behind his wife's back for about 6 years. On September 28, 2000, Kimberly picked up her youngest daughter, Jill, 5 years old, from dance class. Jill was experiencing sharp pain in her lower abdomen, so they decided to leave class early. She also picked up her 7-year-old son, Bradley, from his swimming lessons. According to the neighbors, who lived next door, Kimberly and the children returned home around 7:30 p.m. The neighbors saw Kimberly pulling into her driveway in her car. Kimberly opened the garage door and drove inside, spending a considerable amount of time there. The neighbors didn't know what happened there, they didn't pay any attention to her, but a few times, when they looked out the window, they saw her car was still there. No screams or strange noises were heard until 9:20 p.m. At that time, David was playing basketball and came home late from the game. Therefore, he rushed back home to avoid arguing with his wife and put the children to bed in time. The drive home took about 5 minutes. Upon arriving home around 9:30 p.m., he was surprised to find the garage door still open. As he entered, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife, Kimberly, half naked and lying in a pool of blood, had a gunshot wound to the head. The car's driver's side door was open, and their children were in the back seat. Their daughter Jill was alive, but their son Bradley seemed lifeless. However, David saw Bradley flinch and believed the boy could still be saved, so he then rushed to pull Bradley out of the car. David, a former police officer, found Bradley still warm and attempted to administer first aid. Unfortunately, it was too late, and the child had already passed away. In a state of panic, David immediately called 911 and informed the dispatcher of the tragedy. He requested that all available paramedics and police officers be sent to his house, as his wife and children were dead. David then rushed to his uncle's house, which was nearby. His uncle, a serviceman, was shocked by the news and grabbed his gun to accompany David back to the house. Upon their return, David overcome with grief, and his uncle had to physically restrain him from re-entering the house. Soon after, police and an ambulance arrived at the scene. Police initially believed the murder was linked to a botched robbery, in which Kimberly and her children returned home at an unfortunate time and were attacked. However, there were no signs of forced entry, and the home's contents were intact. Kimberly was found with her pants down and her shoes neatly placed on the roof of the car. This led detectives to suspect that a sexual assault had occurred, and it was believed that she was shot to prevent her from being a witness, especially since her children were also killed. However, the crime scene didn't appear to be a random. Only 3 shell casings were found at the scene, matching the number of shots to the head, with no stray bullets or evidence of a wild shooting spree. A forensic examination revealed skin cells under Kimberly's fingernails, which were forwarded to the lab for DNA testing. Additionally, a palm print was found on the card used by Kimberly. Another significant piece of evidence was a gray sweatshirt discovered in the back seat with her deceased son, Bradley. Based on this evidence, the possibility of robbery was dismissed, although the theory of rape remained under investigation. The police began to focus on David Cam, a former policeman, as their primary suspect, as it is often the closest individuals who are involved. Although David had never displayed aggression towards his family before this incident, his depraved lifestyle became a point of interest for detectives. If before it was just a reason for neighbors and colleagues to discuss, now it is more like a motive for murder. It was rumored that the relationship was deteriorating, possibly heading toward divorce due to infidelity, which may have led David to feel desperate or vengeful. Additionally, a new clue was found just days before the murder: the life insurance payout unexpectedly increased. This detail further fueled the investigation. Interrogating David, a former police officer, was very difficult because he was familiar with investigative techniques. As a result, detectives employed alternative strategies. They pressured him to confess, suggesting all evidence pointed to him, but David consistently denied any involvement. He asserted that he had no connection to the family's murder and never wished them harm. According to David, his marriage to Kimberly was not always smooth, they experiencing issues common in relationships. He candidly admitted to constantly cheating on his wife but claimed to still love her and their children. He expressed surprise that he did not know who could harm his wife and children. He also said that both he and his wife had very good relationships with people around them and that his wife had no enemies. A forensic examination revealed that Kimberly had not been raped, but their daughter, Jill, showed signs of inflammation, which could be a sign of violence or a genitourinary condition, although the experts did not properly note this in the report. The autopsy confirmed that 3 people died between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. David's behavior was suspicious, particularly when he initially refused to hand over his clothes to investigators, but he eventually consented. He also willingly provided samples for DNA testing. However, following this, David began to threaten the detective in charge of the interrogation, claiming that if he went to jail, he would return to kill them all. Forensic experts inspected the crime scene and compared the evidence found with the condition of the bodies. Upon arrival, a specialist noticed a strong smell of bleach at the scene. They found a large bucket and a mop, indicating someone had attempted to clean up blood stains and rearrange the furniture. Detectives suspect that this was deliberately intended to eliminate evidence. Robbers or rapists typically do not clean up after themselves. There were several unusual elements in the case, such as signs of cleaning, Kimberly being undressed, an unknown sweatshirt on Bradley, and Jill having unexplained injuries. These factors suggested that the scene had been staged, and David, an experienced policeman, it is entirely possible to do this. The police had significant doubts about the fingerprints found on the car. The vehicle had been parked in public places every day, meaning the fingerprints could belong to any city resident and weren't necessarily linked to the crime. Accurately identifying the owner of the fingerprints was not possible. Another puzzling aspect was the position of Kimberly's shoes. It had been removed from her feet and neatly placed on the car's roof. Investigators considered two theories. One suggested that Kimberly had taken off her shoes while still in the car and put them on the roof when she exited. However, it was unclear why she would do this. Perhaps she drove without shoes, but David insisted that his wife never drove that way. The second hypothesis is, the criminal could have had a strange obsession with women's shoes. Besides, the gray sweatshirt found on Bradley was not recognized by David. He had no knowledge of its origin or ownership, suggesting it likely belonged to the criminal. But why was it on the child? Based on the evidence collected, 36-year-old David Cam was arrested for the murder of his family, facing charges for 3 murders. During the trial, the microscopic blood spatter on his clothes became the primary evidence of his guilt. The motive was thought to stem from infidelity and promiscuity, which drove him to commit extreme acts. Neighbors testified that they heard gunshots coming from the garage around 9:20 p.m. as soon as David returned home. The prosecution maintained that David was guilty, while the defense presented counterarguments. Experts noted that if David had shot someone at close range, there would have been an amount of blood splatter on his clothes. In many more visible stains. David claimed to have an alibi, with 11 witnesses confirming that he had been at a basketball game until at least 9 p.m. This was also backed up by billing records from his cell phone. Despite this, the prosecutors argued that they had compelling reasons to consider him the murderer. They questioned his alibi, citing his affairs. 12 women he had recently been involved with testified that he had flirted with them and used his police badge and uniform to approach there. The DNA evidence from the crime scene was expected to be the primary proof of David's guilt. However, testing revealed no match with David's DNA. Additionally, the handprint found on the vehicle did not belong his. Despite analyzing all collected materials through a criminal database, no connections were found. Ultimately, investigators discovered 8 microscopic drops of blood on David's clothes, which were identified as belonging to his daughter, Jill. An expert witness at the crime scene initially suggested that the blood drops found on clothing could only result a point-blank shooting. However, it was later discovered that this person was just an ordinary photographer and not a forensic scientist. Despite this, he acted as a forensic scientist during the first trial and drew significant conclusions. Additionally, David's alibi was also questioned. 11 witnesses consistently testified that he was going to the game and could not have been home when the murder occurred. Furthermore, David would have needed to shower and change his clothes afterwards. Medical examinations of Jill revealed that the trauma to her genitals was due to inflammation she was experiencing at the time. This led to the rejection of the original theory that David had perpetrated sexual violence against his daughter. The defense argued that the tiny blood droplets, once considered crucial evidence of guilt, were too small to accuse. They contended that if David had repeatedly shot his children and wife, there would have been a larger amount of blood and bigger stains. They claimed that these small blood stains on David's shirt were from him reaching over Jill to help Bradley out of the car. On March 17, 2002, David Cam was found guilty of murdering 3 individuals and was sentenced to 195 years in prison. He quickly appealed the decision, claiming that the trial had been unfair and that he had been wrongly convicted. In August 2004, the Supreme Court agreed to hear his appeal. However, the prosecution maintained that David was responsible for the murders of his family. A retrial took place in 2005, during which it was discovered that some DNA evidence had not been compared with existing databases by the police. This raises suspicions that there may have been a plot to harm David. The investigators had not pursued other suspects and focused solely on him. After the retrial, police re-examined the DNA samples from the crime scene and found a match with a criminal named Charles Bonney, who had been recently released from prison. Charles acknowledged that a sweatshirt found at the scene belonged to him but claimed he had donated it to the Salvation Army long before the crime and did not know what had happened to it. Charles owned a pair of fancy women's shoes and had previously been involved in 3 kidnappings of women. He was also known by the nickname Ridge, which was written on a sweatshirt that was found but could not be identified. Forensic analysis of the evidence revealed that palm prints, DNA from the clothes, and DNA from Kimberly's underwear and under her fingernails all matched Charles. Before committing the crime, he was out on bail and was a suspect to the police, who later summoned him for questioning. During the interrogation, Charles denied any involvement in the murder and lied in response to all police inquiries. He frequently changed his story. Eventually, he claimed that he had gone to David's house to sell him a gun. According to him, after purchasing the weapon, David shot his entire family. Charles stated that he was still in the house at the time but felt compelled to remain silent because he was threatened with death. He insisted that he tried to escape but accidentally tripped over one of Kimberly's shoes. He tried to present himself as a good person, explaining to the police that he had picked up Kimberly's shoes and placed them on the roof of car. However, he could not account for how his DNA was found on Kimberly's underwear and body, despite claiming he had not touched her. Everyone believed that Charles's claims were false. During a re-examination of the evidence, experts discovered a new set of DNA samples belonging to Charles's ex-girlfriend, which had been found at the crime scene by accident. She was questioned, and it emerged that on the night of the murder, Charles had returned home in a disturbed state, nervous, covered in blood, and breathing heavily. Additionally, he was found to have a gun. Meanwhile, Charles showed a keen interest in the investigation into the murder of the Kimberly family, closely following every news update on TV. This behavior made his ex-girlfriend suspicious of his involvement in the crime. Furthermore, Charles failed a polygraph test. As a result, Charles Bonney was arrested and charged with the murders of Kimberly and her 2 children, Bradley and Jill, but he maintained his innocence. During his trial, he quickly pleaded guilty to all 3 charges on his lawyer's advice but did not provide any details about the crime. He received a sentence of 225 years in prison. Although the murderer, Charles, has confessed to the crime and been convicted, but David Cam's trial is still ongoing. It seemed like it was time to drop all charges against David and release him. However, prosecution began to argue that David was an accomplice to the crime and colluded with Charles. The primary evidence supporting this claim was the intimate injuries found on David's daughter, Jill. It was believed that David had a history of domestic abuse and had also molested his daughter. When his wife discovered this, she threatened to go to the police, leading him to decide to kill his entire family. David supposedly conspired with Charles, who had been released from prison, to cover up his heinous actions. Although David might not have physically participated in the murders, the prosecution argued that he incited Charles to commit the act and served as the ideological mastermind behind it. During the new trial, David denied all these allegations. Another forensic expert examined Jill's body and confirmed that there was no evidence of violence. Instead, the inflammation was linked to a medical condition. The defense argued that David and Charles had never met, had no mutual acquaintances, and there was no correspondence, phone calls, or any other form of communication between them. On March 6, 2006, David was once again found guilty of murdering his family and was sentenced to life in prison. He immediately filed an appeal, particularly upset that the new charges included sexual abuse of his own daughter. However, the prosecution failed to present any evidence of violence. The appellate court reviewed the case materials and again ruled in favor of David, citing insufficient evidence to uphold the original sentence. It was revealed that the previous prosecutor, who was accusing David, had a financial interest in the case because he was under contract to write a book about it. This thing of interest compromised his objectivity. A new prosecutor took over the case, leading to the discovery of new evidence. A photographer, who had testified in the first two trials as an expert, admitted to lying about his qualifications and revealed that he was not a forensic scientist. Further analysis of the DNA samples confirmed that Charles had left traces at the crime scene and on the victims. Despite this evidence, David continued to face accusations, with the financial motive being highlighted. He had collected $750,000 in life insurance after his wife's death. Ultimately, on October 24, 2013, David Cam was acquitted of all charges. Nevertheless, there remained some who were convinced of his guilt, as well as those who believed in his innocence. Following his acquittal, David Cam filed a lawsuit against the county, seeking $30 million in damages for the emotional distress he suffered. The judge acknowledged that the state's experts had reasonably concluded that the blood spatter indicated David's involvement and asserted that no police officer had intentionally tried to frame him. David was awarded $5 million in moral damages for the time he spent in prison. The parents of Kimberly sought payment from him, believing he was still guilty of her death due to financial motives. They demanded a portion of the money he received from insurance and moral compensation. Charles Bonney remains in prison, serving a sentence of 225 years. Remarkably, it took David 13 years to prove his innocence. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Karen Newell. Sunday evening, February 20th, 1994, on a desolate rural road in Orange County, Florida, between Cocoa Beach and Orlando. A car was parked on the side of the road, and a woman was frantically waving her arms at passing vehicles. When a driver finally stopped, she pleaded for help. In the car's headlights, a man could be seen bleeding in the passenger seat. A woman named Karen Newell was trying to save her husband, John Newell, who had been shot multiple times but was still alive. Karen asked the driver for a phone and urgently called 911, screaming that her husband was dying. Within minutes, a deputy sheriff arrived, followed by police and paramedics, but it was too late for John. He needed a forensic expert, not medical assistance. He died before help could arrive, and all the doctors could do was confirm his death from multiple gunshot wounds. They immediately began communicating with Karen about the tragic situation. Karen recounted that they were attacked while returning home to Orlando after a day at the beach. On the way back, their car started having problems that she couldn't understand. Her husband asked her to pull over to the side of the road to check the issue. As Karen got out and opened the hood, a small sedan parked right next to them. Inside were three men who looked threatening. One detail she remembered was a sticker on the rear window that said "Bad Boy." The men got out of their car without noticing Karen, who was focused on the engine. She watched as one of them approached her husband's window and demanded his wallet. Her husband refused and tried to defend himself. During the struggle, one of the attackers pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. Afterward, the men jumped back into their car and drove away. Fortunately, Karen was unharmed. She quickly ran to John, who was bleeding. She felt helpless and couldn't do anything to save him. Karen Newell was originally from Florida and had faced a difficult life filled with cruelty since childhood. Despite these challenges, she maintained a cheerful and energetic spirit, enjoying parties and socializing with her many friends throughout high school. As she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, heads turned wherever she went, but this did not lead to a happy family life. After graduating, she experienced several unsuccessful relationships and, by her 20th birthday, had been married twice, with both marriages ending in divorce. Nevertheless, she hopeful. That spring, she focused on advancing her career. Previously, she had held various accounting jobs and worked as a nurse in a private clinic. This charming brunette even entered beauty contests, hoping to launch a modeling career, but luck was not on her side in those pursuits. One evening, she walked into a bar in one of Orlando's suburbs. There, she found a friendly stranger sitting alone with a drink. He was John, a respected local mechanic who owned a car repair shop. Just before their meeting, John had gone through a difficult breakup with his first wife, a Navy nurse who had just returned home from a long business trip. She told him she was seeing someone else, which was why he went to the bar that night. When Karen saw him, she felt an immediate attraction. Confident and outgoing, she approached him, sat down next to him, and began chatting. She discovered that he was the owner of a popular auto repair shop, young, successful, and attractive. Their brief encounter quickly developed into a passionate night. John then fell in love with Karen, and she felt the same. Their relationship flourished rapidly, and just 2 months after their intense night together, they got married on May 22, 1993. The newlyweds appeared genuinely happy, surrounded by a wave of love and joy. Shortly after their wedding, Karen's modeling prospects improved, thanks to her husband's connections and her regular participation in beauty contests. She landed a well-paying television job, leading to a busy schedule that often kept her away for several days. Despite John's worries about losing Karen like he lost his first wife, she reassured him that she would never betray him. She reminded him that their sacrifices would eventually pay off, and together they dreamed of retiring in 5 years, free from work and worry. However, just a few months after their wedding, Karen discovered she was pregnant. The couple was thrilled. John's desire for a large family seemed within reach, and they continued to support each other through this exciting new chapter. A few days after Valentine's Day, they planned a weekend getaway to the beach in Florida to relax after a busy week. On February 20th, John and Karen packed their bags and drove to Cocoa Beach, located on the east side of Orlando. Known for its stunning views and excellent surfing, they spent the entire day enjoying the beach, having a barbecue, swimming, and before leaving, stopped by a surf shop to buy some gear. After that, they packed their belongings and headed home. Karen was driving because her husband had consumed some alcohol earlier and wanted to avoid losing his license. John sat in the front passenger seat. They passed through a toll booth and entered the state highway. At this time, her husband was adjusting the radio, which wasn't functioning properly. Suddenly, the car skidded slightly. Karen mentioned to her husband that the car felt odd, and she noticed a strong vibration in the steering wheel. They decided to pull over and investigate, but then the attack occurred. John was shot multiple times while sitting in the passenger seat of the car. The police conducted a detailed search for the attackers. Using Karen's testimony, they were able to create a detailed description of the car, noting one key detail, a sticker on the rear window. Karen later reported feeling unwell. She was pregnant, so emergency services rushed her to the hospital to ensure her and her baby's safety. 2.40 caliber shell casings were found near the car, indicating that the men were dangerous criminals. They were armed with at least one handgun. Surprisingly, they fled so quickly that they forgot to take the victim's wallet. Police alerted neighboring counties, notified all available patrols, and warned drivers of passing cars. Checkpoints were set up, with officers carefully monitoring vehicles. Initially, attention was focused on cars with bad boy stickers. However, no drivers reported seeing such a car, and it did not pass through the checkpoints. In the ambulance, Karen answered all the necessary questions about the incident. However, the health of the Karen and child was the main priority at that time. After being examined at the hospital, doctors confirmed that the Karen was in stable condition. She was able to speak with police officers later that same day. Karen provided a detailed account of the events. She explained that they were not alone on the beach. A friend from work, Peter, joined them shortly after they arrived at Cocoa Beach. The three of them spent most of the day together, and at the end of the day, they drove back to Orlando in two separate cars. Peter drove his own car while Karen followed him closely behind. After passing the toll booth, Peter drove ahead and quickly vanished from view. Soon after, Karen's car began to vibrate. Her husband insisted they stop immediately to check the car's condition. Karen got out of the driver's seat and opened the hood. Suddenly, she heard the screech of brakes as a stranger's car pulled up near theirs. Just seconds later, gunfire erupted. In that moment, Karen crouched down to hide under the open hood. She overheard the attackers, dressed in black and white, demanding her husband's wallet. Then, several loud shots rang out, and the criminals fled the scene. She noticed that the robbers didn't take the wallet, but she couldn't see their faces. The police arrived quickly and began investigating the scene, exploring various possibilities. Some unusual aspects caught their attention, raising doubts about Karen's statement. First, no one reported seeing a car marked Bad Boy. Second, it seemed odd that the robbers, who were after a wallet for money, would leave abruptly and forget their loot after committing murder. Third, they overlooked the woman and didn't check why the car's hood was open. Finally, it was odd that John, a mechanic, didn't check under the hood himself, while the one checking the car was Karen, who didn't know much about cars. The police did not charge Karen with fraud. Instead, they chose to gather more details about the case. The police quickly found some interesting information, specifically a report from 3 months earlier in Orlando. It turned out that an assault had occurred at Karen's home. According to the couple's previous statements, at around 9 p.m., Karen heard a noise in their backyard. She told her husband about it and asked him to check it out. When John went outside, he encountered two masked men. The neighbor quickly left the house when he heard the noise, and the porch light suddenly turned on, scaring the attackers, so they ran away. John returned home and told his wife what had happened, and she called the rescue service. John was not seriously injured, but he had a lot of bruises. John had no valuable information that could help catch the criminals, since he could not see their faces. After a brief and unsuccessful search, John's family's case was declared unsolved. John believed that he had interrupted the robbers, leading to their attack on his home. However, things now seemed more serious. He may have inadvertently made enemies, and they had come back to destroy him. This also explained why they did not take his wallet. Their goal was never to steal, but to kill him. The police started investigating all the people that John might have had conflicts with recently. John ran a successful business, raising the question of whether competitors could resort to extreme actions. Most of John's friends and acquaintances were unaware of any conflicts. John was known to be a kind and non-confrontational person, never speaking about any unpleasant situations that might cause resentment towards him. Everyone agreed that he was always willing to help others. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that John's kind nature may have contributed to the tragedy. Police discovered that shortly before the attack, a stranger had appeared in John's backyard. He was identified as Peter, a friend of Karen's who had recently gone on vacation with their family John. Peter's apartment had been broken into, forcing him to seek temporary housing. Karen convinced John to allow Peter to stay in her home for a while to support him during this difficult time. Peter is an attractive young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. After new discoveries in the investigation, there is growing suspicion that Karen has feelings for Peter, and that Peter is likely the father of the child. It is possible that the couple planned to eliminate John in order to benefit financially from their relationship. Peter, who had a close relationship with Karen, became a suspect in the murder investigation. He was brought to the police station for questioning. During the interview, Peter's account matched what Karen had said. He confirmed that he had gone to Cocoa Beach with Karen's family and spent time there with them, drinking beer and smoking marijuana. That evening, he drove away after passing through a checkpoint, not waiting for Karen's family because he was on his way home to Port St. Lucie. Overall, his story was consistent with Karen's account. He provided detailed information about his background to counter any claims about an affair with Karen. At that moment, it became clear that Karen had lied. She had claimed that Peter was an assistant producer at a TV channel where she worked, but that was false. In reality, Peter did not have a steady job. He had dropped out of school and occasionally did part-time work like mowing lawns. This allowed him to make enough money to get by, but he was not involved in any television work. Police learned from Peter's friends that Karen had been having an affair with Peter, which began a few months before he moved into John's house. During this time, Peter often bragged about his relationship with a married woman and often shared the story of how they met. It was later revealed that Karen had used business trips as an excuse to spend time with Peter. At the time, Karen was 29 and Peter was 18. While Karen kept the relationship a secret, she often visited him in the city, where they enjoyed days together and spent John's money. They met by chance while driving on the highway. The Karen caught his attention with her handcuff keychain hanging from her rearview mirror. When they stopped at a traffic light, he happily stuck his hands out the window as if they were handcuffed. To his surprise, she smiled back and they began flirting. After their first meeting, they spent the night together on the beach. His friends noticed that Peter was very fond of Karen. He even talked seriously about marrying her and was convinced that she might be pregnant with his child. The couple had a clear motive for killing John. However, at this stage of the investigation, there was no concrete evidence to confirm their involvement. The first step was to locate the murder weapon. A .22 caliber pistol was found at the crime scene. Police are looking for witnesses who may know about Peter and Karen's weapons. They interviewed one of the Karen's ex-husbands, who revealed that Peter was not Karen's only sexual partner. She often meets with her ex in various hotels. In November 1993, she approached him with an unusual request to borrow a .22 caliber pistol for self-defense, claiming she felt threatened after two strangers attacked John. He believed her and provided her with the weapon, which raised suspicions. It is necessary to locate the pistol and conduct ballistics testing to determine whether John was shot with this gun. When the police asked Karen's ex-husband about the weapon, he reported that she had not yet returned it. This raised the police's suspicions about Karen's involvement in her husband's death. As they investigated her background, they discovered that she was on probation at the time. In the 1980s, Karen had been convicted of credit card forgery and large-scale theft. Because of her probation status, she was not allowed to possess the weapon given to her by her ex-husband. Consequently, just 8 days after John's death, Karen was arrested for violating her probation, which meant she would remain in custody until the investigation was finished. Police quickly received crucial evidence just 2 days after the arrest. They interviewed Louis Aragon, Karen's half-brother. Louis had a criminal history. In the summer of 1993, Karen approached him with a proposition. Her husband had a $500,000 life insurance policy, and Karen wanted him to help eliminate John. In exchange, she promised him a large payout. However, despite the tempting offer, Louis refused to participate in the murder. In November, Peter and Karen planned to brutally beat John in their yard over a money dispute. Fortunately, A neighbor intervened in time and scared the attackers away, which angered Karen, who had begun to plan how to get rid of her troublesome husband. Key to the investigation was the testimony of her half-brother, Louis. He revealed that Karen had approached him just days after the first attack and tried to convince him to participate in a second murder, but he had refused. Peter, however, was willing to do anything for Karen. As Thanksgiving approached in 1993, Karen convinced her husband to allow Peter to live with them. The police needed to verify the truthfulness of their new witness. They started by reviewing the couple's insurance policies. They discovered that Karen had taken out a life insurance policy on her husband for $250,000, which was stored in his safe. Over time, she acquired several additional policies, totaling around $500,000, a significant sum at that time. It appeared that her greed led her to eliminate her husband in order to collect the insurance payouts. Karen was determined to receive the money. In the days following John's death, she contacted various insurance companies, and some had already issued her compensation by the time of the investigation. However, the largest payments were on hold, prompting Karen to visit multiple insurance companies to demand her money. Meanwhile, on March 28, 1994, Peter was arrested as well. Both were charged with John Newell's murder. The prosecutor's office alleges that from the beginning, Karen began her relationship with John with the intention of receiving his insurance money. After getting married, she quickly took out a $250,000 life insurance policy and continued to purchase smaller policies. However, she did not directly participate in any crimes. Instead, she manipulated Peter and convinced him that they would marry and have a child together, portraying her husband, John, as an obstacle to their future. After the murder, a pregnancy test was conducted and it was found that she was not pregnant. She had an IUD, preventing any possibility of pregnancy at the time. Karen was fully aware of this. It was clear that her claim of being pregnant was simply a manipulation tactic to control the men around her. Given her deceitful nature, the prosecutor's office was aiming for the death penalty. And Peter was also facing the death penalty. So it was easy to get a confession by offering a deal. The plea agreement included cross-examination, during which Peter quickly admitted to having an affair with Karen. He claimed that they had been intimate at every meeting. She had won his heart. Peter revealed that it was Karen who had suggested attacking John in his apartment. When that plan failed, Karen began planning a more elaborate crime. As soon as Peter got out of the car, he pointed a gun at John's head and fired 3 more bullets into John's chest. Peter then dumped the gun in a lake several miles from the crime scene. Divers were able to recover the gun, and ballistics tests confirmed that it was the same gun that had shot John Newell. Additionally, the gun's serial number matched the serial number registered to Karen's ex-husband. In exchange for this crucial information, Peter was offered a plea deal for second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder. During the preliminary hearing, it was clear that Karen's lawyers were determined to fight hard. They tried to blame Peter, arguing that he was the mastermind behind the crime, motivated by jealousy over. Karen was portrayed as an innocent victim caught in the love triangle. If Karen was not involved in planning the murder, then how did Peter get the gun that her ex-husband owned? She never gave a satisfactory explanation for this. In addition, Peter and Karen's ex-husband did not know each other. The ex-husband even confirmed that Karen asked him for a gun. On September 5, 1994, Peter was sentenced to a long prison term with the possibility of parole, and he was released in early January 2010. And Karen Newell was sentenced to life in prison. She complained that it was unfair that Peter, who pulled the trigger, received the lighter sentence than she. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Amanda Perot. On February 3, 2020, Seth Perot called his boss, the sheriff, to report a tragic incident at his home. His wife had died and he needed help. When the police arrived, Seth had just gotten out of the shower. Inside the bedroom, they discovered the body of 44-year-old Amanda on the bed, shot in the head. Initially, the scene appeared to match Seth's description on the phone. Then forensic experts began combing the area and collecting evidence. Seth was taken to the police station to give a statement. He said that he and his wife, Amanda, were lying in bed when they got into an argument. During the argument, Amanda suddenly pulled out a gun and shot herself in the head. Seth said that he had no time to react and stop her. When questioned by police, he described their day before the tragedy. They had dropped their children off at school and had not been anywhere else until the incident. Seth appeared extremely upset, almost in tears, expressing regret for losing the woman he loved more than anything after 8 happy years together. Initially, Seth said he had not touched Amanda. However, he later said he had hugged her several times after the shooting. He struggled to remember whether he had touched the gun and repeatedly claimed that he was a good cop. The police asked him more questions, leading to increasing doubts about his credibility. They knew that Seth, who had come from another police department, had a bad reputation and was known for aggressive behavior at work. When Amanda's relatives heard about the tragedy, they rushed to the house and informed the police that Amanda would never act in such a way or leave her children with an abusive husband. They were convinced that Seth had killed Amanda and urged the police to investigate the possibility. Meanwhile, forensic experts thoroughly examined the crime scene and concluded that it was a homicide. Their findings were supported by the location of the body and the gun. A .380 caliber Smith & Wesson was discovered nearby, with a discarded magazine found next to her right side. A bullet was found in the chamber of the semi-automatic pistol. When the gun is fired, the spent cartridge case is ejected, and a new cartridge is loaded. Because there was a bullet in the chamber, the magazine should have been removed after the shot was fired. If the gun was functioning properly, the magazine could only be ejected by pressing a button, which would have had to be done after the shot. However, if the Amanda died immediately, who pressed the button? The weapon was tested and found to have no faults. Additionally, there was no blood on Amanda's hands or on the long sleeves of her shirt. The bedroom contained 20 miniature whiskey bottles, and there were no signs of forced entry or any intruders. The primary suspect was the Seth. He was a police officer trained to use a gun, and the murder was carried out with his service weapon. Police began investigating the couple's relationship more closely and discovered some interesting details. Amanda Perot was born in 1975 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, a small town with a population of about 29,000. Relatives described her as a cheerful and kind person, always willing to help others and devoted to her family. The Amanda had 2 children from her first marriage, which ended in a difficult divorce due to her ex-husband's abusive behavior. Amanda struggled to escape this toxic relationship. In 2011, after her divorce, Amanda met Seth online. At that time, Seth was seriously ill with cancer, unemployed, and living with his parents, who were supporting him financially. He loved communicating online, and when he discovered Amanda's profile, he felt intrigued. He contacted her and they started chatting. To Amanda, Seth seemed like the complete opposite of her ex-husband. He was sweet, polite, and kind. As their conversations continued, Amanda and Seth grew close and started considering a face-to-face meeting. Eventually, Seth's health improved, and his cancer went into remission. He invited Amanda to meet in person. And their date went well. They instantly liked each other and began dating. During this time, Amanda learns that Seth has a daughter from a previous marriage who lives with mother, and he is determined to fight for custody of the child. Amanda moved in with Seth's parents along with. They were pleased that Seth had finally found a partner and believed everything was going well. Amanda took on the responsibility of caring for Seth, which led her to drift away from her own family. Two of her sisters noted that after the move, Amanda dedicated herself entirely to looking after Seth. She also worked and took care of her children, leaving her little time to connect with family and friends. It was a challenging period for Amanda, but she never complained. Seth insisted that Amanda quit her job to be with him all the time, and his fairly wealthy parents supported this decision. Over time, Amanda's relatives lost touch with her. She stopped attending family gatherings, missing Christmas and Thanksgiving. She also ceased to personally congratulate her relatives on their birthdays, choosing instead to do so only by phone. Amanda became focused entirely on Seth and the children, celebrating all holidays with his family. Seth then took Amanda's cell phone, saying she didn't need it because she was always home with him. Amanda didn't have a phone, so her family couldn't contact her. Seth controlled every aspect of Amanda's life and wouldn't let her leave the house alone. After 5 years together, Seth and Amanda secretly married on June 23, 2017. Only their children attended the wedding. They didn't invite anyone else or tell anyone about this important moment in Amanda's life. Many believe that Seth married Amanda primarily for his own interests. He was determined to gain custody of his daughter from his ex-wife, and to do this, he needed to formalize his relationship with Amanda. Many thought this was his true motivation for marrying her. Without this goal, he might not have married at all. Although Seth appeared happy with Amanda, he had complete control over her and was very persistent in getting his way. He spent months in court fighting for custody of his daughter. Eventually, he was successful and won full custody of his daughter, after which Seth took his daughter to live with them. Amanda had no say in family decisions and was completely submissive to his decisions. In 2018, Seth's father purchased a beautiful house for them near the lake, and the family moved in. Amanda remained a housewife, as Seth did not allow her to work. A year later, Seth secured a job as a patrolman with the Tenton Police Department. After Seth started his job, his relationship with Amanda deteriorated. He began drinking excessively after work. One night, he fell down the stairs while drunk and got hurt. This led him to misuse painkillers along with alcohol, causing him to become extremely irritable and aggressive. He often threatened Amanda physically. On January 28, 2020, after suffering another attack from her husband, Amanda escaped to a neighbor's house and called 911 for help. When the police arrived, Amanda showed them the bruises from the abuse. Their 3 children confirmed her story. Seth's 8-year-old daughter reported that she had heard screams and seen her father pushing and hitting Amanda. Terrified, she had hidden in the closet to avoid the violence. After Amanda fled, Seth discovered the children hiding and forced them to come out. They obeyed but were very frightened of him. Seth was then arrested and charged that evening. Amanda called her sister, asking for a ride the next morning because she was afraid to stay home, knowing that her husband would be released soon. The next morning, Seth was released on $1,500 bail and returned home. Amanda later called her sister back saying that she didn't need to come anymore because everything was fine. However, her sister was shocked, realizing how dangerous Seth was to Amanda and the children. She couldn't understand why Amanda continued to forgive him. Amanda's sister came to her house and tried to convince her to leave with the children and divorce Seth. Amanda was against this idea. Her sister then left. Seth was temporarily suspended during the investigation into allegations of domestic violence and child abuse. Amanda took part in the hearings related to Seth's case. When the judge asked if she wanted a restraining order against him, she declined, saying she had forgiven him. As a result, Seth was released, and they went home together. Just 5 days later, on February 3, 2020, Amanda was found dead. Police, after reviewing a history of conflict and domestic violence, concluded that Amanda's death was not an accident. They suspected Seth of shooting her. During questioning, Seth maintained his innocence, claiming that their argument was due to recent allegations of domestic violence. During the argument, she pulled out a gun and shot herself. The police questioned how Amanda could have accessed Seth's gun, given his strict nature and the control he had over her. Police later found a handwritten note on Amanda's nightstand in which she praised her husband and described his great character. In the note, she wrote, "Amanda Perot wants to retract her statement. Her husband has never raised a hand to hit her. She feels very bad for the humiliation she has caused him. She is willing to accept any punishment she deserves for her actions." However, Amanda's sister does not believe that Amanda would write such things about her husband. The handwriting on the note appears to be different from Amanda's usual style, raising concerns that she may not have written it herself, or that she wrote it under pressure or at the behest of her husband. Therefore, the handwriting appears unusual. Seth has a hard time explaining the bruises on Amanda's body. Police suspect that he coerced her into writing the letter to make her death appear voluntary, in an attempt to escape guilt. The investigation is ongoing, with police believing Seth shot his wife and actively gathering evidence against him. They have interviewed the couple's friends and family to uncover more about the history of domestic violence in their relationship. Neighbors reported hearing screams from the couple's house almost daily and often saw Seth intoxicated. The community was aware that the couple frequently argued, with Seth being the aggressor when he drank. Amanda, on the other hand, appeared to be a quiet and modest person, and neighbors never saw her drinking. There were multiple instances where neighbors witnessed Seth dragging Amanda by her hair in their driveway. Although they felt sympathy for her, no one called the police out of fear of Seth, who was a police officer himself. On the day Amanda died, the neighborhood was unusually quiet. There were no sounds coming from the house. The only witness to the events was Seth, whose testimony was not trusted during the investigation. It was revealed that just 20 minutes before Seth's call, a deputy police officer had shown up at their door with a summons for domestic violence. Video from the doorbell camera showed the officer approaching, introducing himself, and waiting for someone to answer. Although Seth heard noises inside, no one answered. The deputy police officer were puzzled by Seth's behavior, knowing that Seth was a police officer who knew the procedures. Seth only needed to hand over some documents, so the deputy police officer wondered why he was hiding and refusing to open the door. Initially, the deputy police officer thought that Seth might not be fully clothed, which could explain the lack of response. He turned his back to the door and asked Seth to simply hand over the documents without looking inside, but still no one responded. This was unusual. After waiting another 7 minutes, the deputy police officer left. They later speculated that when Seth saw the police at the door, he became frightened. Apparently, a shot was fired just before the deputy police officer arrived. After the deputy left, he took a few minutes to calm down and then called his sheriff on his cell phone. Police later discovered that Seth had lied about not leaving the house on the day of the murder. Police reviewed surveillance cameras from the area and the couple's bank card transactions, finding that they had gone to a store 10 miles from their home that day and purchased 20 bottles of liquor. More importantly, the cameras recorded what the Seth was wearing, a Pink Floyd t-shirt and black sweatpants. 4 hours later, when police arrived at the Peralt's home, Seth was wearing different clothes. A plain black t-shirt and the clothes he had worn to the store were found in the washing machine, which had been turned off. In addition, Seth was still wet from his shower. Police suspected that he may have tried to wash off gunpowder residue and blood that may have gotten on him during the shooting, but he had not started the washing cycle. A small smear of Amanda's blood was later found on his pants, and traces of gunpowder were discovered on Seth's left hand. Based on this evidence, the investigation resumed just 2 days after the tragedy on February 5 in 2020. Seth was arrested for the murder of Amanda Perot. He denied any involvement in her death and also refuted allegations of domestic violence. The couple's 3 children were interviewed by child psychologists, and all 3 reported that Seth frequently abused their mother in front of them. The day before Amanda's death, she urged the children not to speak to the police, warning them that Seth might lose custody of their daughter and could retaliate violently. The children lived in constant fear of him. Their testimonies were presented as evidence during the trial. Seth's daughter requested to move in with her mother, and this request was granted, while Amanda's other children stayed with her sister throughout the trial. On August 21, 2020, something unexpected occurred. The autopsy report was released. The state medical examiner concluded that Amanda Perot had shot herself, citing the absence of struggle signs and the burns on her skin from the gunshot. This finding shocked the prosecution, who disagreed with the forensic expert's assessment. The trial began on November 3, 2020, with the prosecution presenting all the evidence that Seth was guilty: gunpowder residue on his hands, blood on his unwashed clothes, discrepancies in the placement of Amanda's body in the gun, and most importantly, Seth's motive for killing his wife. Despite this evidence, Seth maintained his innocence. His attorney argued that changing clothes and showering were not important. Seth simply chose to shower during the day and made no attempt to hide anything. The blood stain may have been from a previous incident where Amanda accidentally hurt herself. However, the presence of gunpowder on Seth's hands was unexplained. It was suggested he might have gotten it while at the police station. The lawyer pointed out that even the state medical examiner concluded Amanda shot herself, as there were no clear signs of a struggle. While burns on her body indicated she was shot from a close distance, the prosecutor claimed that Seth had given her alcohol and drugs, preventing her from defending herself. Amanda's phone had photos of her with a bruise under her eye and a split lip, as well as videos of her husband threatening her, which she had recorded secretly. In a message to her sisters, Amanda said, "Seth just choked she until I almost lost consciousness. He split she lip." The prosecutor noted that a gun magazine was found next to her right hand, while a firearm with a loaded cartridge was located about 1.5 meters away against the wall and ceiling. Blood was also found on the bedspread, with 2 cartridges present, suggesting that the crime scene had been staged. This was in contrast to Seth's claim that he had not touched or moved the body or the gun. The sister of the Amanda testified in court that Amanda had told her just days before the tragedy that if anything happened to her, it would be at the hands of her husband. Police chief reported that when he received the call about Amanda's death, Seth initially mumbled something incoherent before suddenly screaming. Only after he calmed down was he able to explain what had happened. Additionally, Seth's cellmate testified during the trial, claiming that Seth confessed to him about killing his wife. He described how Seth had given Amanda alcohol, sedatives, and painkillers on the day she died, which caused her to lose consciousness, after which he shot her. A toxicology report confirmed that Amanda had high levels of alcohol and drugs in her system at the time of her death. On February 25, 2022, after 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Seth Perot, 45, guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Seth's lawyers were furious with the verdict, claiming that there was no direct evidence to prove his guilt. Following the verdict, Seth Perot's new legal team filed its first appeal, which was denied. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tracy Roberts. In 1998, the Tracy Roberts family relocated from Chicago to the small town of Early, Iowa. The couple, Tracy and Michael, were in their second marriages and each had a son from previous relationships. Tracy was American, while Michael was originally from Australia. They were seen as a respectable young family by the local community. Michael was a computer expert who ran an IT business from home, with many innovative ideas he aimed to pursue. Tracy is an active and sociable housewife who enjoys sports. The couple met online and got married just 18 days after meeting in person. They have since had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and appear to be a very happy family. Many people admired Michael's determination, including his neighbor Mona, a real estate broker with whom they had completed several successful transactions. Mona was eager to continue working with Michael. She said that her 20-year-old son, Dustin, was very private and had a hard time keeping a job. He had tried many different positions but had not been able to hold any for long. Michael suggested that help Dustin discover his strengths. Later, he began teaching Dustin the basics of business. He took him on trips and supported him in attending church. Michael was generally seen as kind, pleasant, and empathetic, while his wife was regarded as sweet and sociable. They raised 3 children together, with Tracy managing the household and children while Michael focused on work, often traveling for business. However, an unexpected situation happened to Tracy's family. On the evening of December 13, 2001, in the town of Early, Tracy was in the kitchen preparing dinner with her children. While the food was being heated, she was also bathing her 1-year-old daughter upstairs. Meanwhile, her 2 older boys, ages 3 and 11, were watching television in the older boy's bedroom. Suddenly, the boys were startled by a piercing scream from their mother. The eldest, Bert, rushed to see what was happening. He saw Tracy trying to enter the room, but someone grabbed her by the hair and pulled her back into the hallway. Holding her baby daughter, Tracy managed to hand her over to Bert before a struggle with the attacker ensued. Tracy slammed the door shut behind her, and the boys could hear the sounds of a struggle and their mother's muffled cries for help. Terrified and unsure of what to do, Bert listened as the noises escalated. Then, after a brief silence, a shot rang out. During the attack, Tracy managed to defend herself against the criminals. One was killed, and the other escaped. Bert called 911 around 7 p.m., reporting that strangers had broken into their home and attacked his mother. Police officers took the call seriously and rushed to the address. It was unclear what had happened to Tracy and her 3 children at that time. Paramedics then arrived to find the children sobbing and Tracy repeatedly shouting that an intruder was still upstairs and pointing towards the stairs. However, as per protocol, paramedics could not enter the house until police had confirmed that the house was secure. The police arrived and went up to the 2nd floor where they found a young man lying dead in a pool of blood. There was no one else in the room. Tracy was quickly placed in an ambulance by a doctor and taken to the nearest medical center. The scene revealed a shocking crime. The entire family was overwhelmed and confused by the situation. The police began an investigation to shed light on this complicated situation. The small town where the incident occurred was a quiet and peaceful community of about 500 residents, all of whom knew each other well. The police began their investigation by questioning Bert, the eldest son. Bert had witnessed an attack on his mother. The attacker had pulled her hair back. Stunned, the boy knew he had to act to protect himself and the other children, so he grabbed a baseball bat, ready to fight off anyone who entered his room. When the chaos died down, he could only hear his mother breathing heavily. Finally, he heard the voices of 2 men outside starting to bang on the door. In fear, the boy began to scream, trying to scare the intruders away. Outside, the men shouted about having guns, and then several shots were fired. Suddenly, his mother opened the door. Bert was relieved that it was finally over. He then called 911. After hearing about the incident, Mona rushed to the scene. She was looking for her 20-year-old son, Dustin, a family friend. His car was parked in a private driveway, but when she arrived, the entire area, including Dustin's car, was cordoned off. She was not allowed into Tracy's house. Mona asked the officers about her son's condition, but they told her that he was dead. Dustin was found lying in a pool of blood near a 2nd-floor bedroom. Tracy had shot him during a struggle. The police did not share any further information with Mona. Tracy woke up in a hospital 20 kilometers from her home. She had injuries to her neck that suggested she had been strangled. Tracy told the police what had happened that night. While she was bathing her daughter on the second floor, she heard noises downstairs. Thinking that her husband had returned early from a business trip, she went down to check. But she discovered two men. When they started to go upstairs, Tracy quickly took her daughter to Bert's room and left the three children in the room. She then tried to enter the room and close the door, but one of the men grabbed her hair and dragged her into the hallway. Then one of the attackers used her jeans to strangle her. During the struggle, Tracy lost consciousness and the attackers lost focus. When she regained consciousness, she heard screaming outside the door. Realizing this was her chance to escape, she got up and ran to the gun safe next to the bed in the master bedroom. Although the attackers chased her, she managed to turn a few numbers and retrieve a gun. Tracy aimed at them and pulled the trigger, but nothing happened because the safety was still on. The attackers were caught off guard, allowing her to fire again after removing the safety. The loud bang stunned her, and she continued to fire at the attackers until the room filled with smoke. Tracy didn't see the criminals, but she heard someone running away from the house. One of the criminals fell, while the other managed to escape. She also heard her frightened children calling her name, so she rushed into the room and opened the door. In a moment of panic, her son swung a bat at her, trying to protect himself, and she narrowly avoided being hit. The most important thing was that the children were safe. As the smoke cleared in the main bedroom, Tracy saw Dustin, a 20-year-old, lying on the floor but still alive. He began to get up, and in her shock, she grabbed the gun and ordered him to stay down, desperate for everything to stop. She yelled at him not to move, but Dustin, who was the son of her friend Mona, didn't listen. He stood up and approached her. Worried for her and the children's safety, she fired several shots, and Dustin fell to his death. Tracy recounted that earlier that day, Dustin visited their home. When he discovered that her husband was away on a business trip, he lingered on the porch for a long time, seemingly unwilling to leave. His behavior was unusual, and Tracy ultimately had to shut the door in his face. Tracy described a second participant in the crime as tall, with dark hair, around 30 years old, but she never saw his face. That evening, Tracy's husband, Michael, was on a business trip in Minneapolis. It was unclear why Dustin, whom Michael was helping, would attack Tracy and their children. The second killer was still at large, raising fears that he might return for revenge. This left Tracy feeling fearful, she unable to sleep because she was worried about her family's safety. The police had a hard time identifying the second suspect, based only on the vague description provided by Tracy. They began investigating Dustin's social connections to determine who might have accompanied him to Tracy's family home. Many people consider Tracy a hero. She gave many interviews to journalists. In front of the cameras, she and her husband, Michael, held hands, and she calmly said that she did what she had to do to protect her family, and the whole hall applauded. Many people thought that her actions were justified. Tracy was brave, she could protect not only herself but also her children. The police were wary of accepting anyone's testimony without evidence, so they began a thorough investigation of the events surrounding the case, finding the story unconvincing. Mona was going through the most difficult time of her life and was heartbroken. To her, the circumstances of her son's murder, as Tracy described them, were meaningless. She was haunted by nightmares of the attack that took her son's life. Mona, the mother of the young man who was shot, spoke to the media about her shock over the incident. She described Dustin as a kind person who had never shown aggression and had no criminal history. There was no reason for him to attack the Tracy family. However, Dustin had to see a psychologist with his mother. He had difficulty making friends at school, was often bullied, and was excluded from parties and celebrations. Despite seeing many doctors, they gave him different diagnoses without clear answers. Could his social difficulties lead to a moment of loss of control? Tracy told the police that she had always feared Dustin. She felt extremely unsafe, even around her husband, and she tried to avoid any encounters with Dustin. Under no circumstances would she let him be alone with the children because she believed he would harm them. Mona was shocked by these allegations. She had no idea that Tracy was facing such serious issues with her son. To Mona, everything seemed just the opposite. The police examined the crime scene and concluded that there was no clear motive for the violent attack. They suggested that it could only make sense if it had been planned as a robbery. The Tracy house contained many valuables, leading Tracy to believe that the young criminals aimed to steal cash or one of Michael's collectible weapons. However, the criminals' behavior did not resemble that of typical robbers. They ignored money and jewelry that were easily visible, and instead of trying to steal from Tracy while she was unconscious after being strangled, they focused solely on inflicting violence without any intent to sexually assault her. The police quickly identified a possible motive linked to Tracy and her husband. Not long before the home invasion, Tracy had experienced a traumatic incident. She was sexually assaulted by a dentist while under anesthesia. She regained consciousness during the assault, and the dentist attempted to silence her by promising to help her with her sexual problems and offering her $150,000 in compensation if she remained quiet. Tracy confided in her husband about this, and he urged her to report it to the police. Just 2 days after the dentist's attack on her, she was preparing to testify in court against her dentist, whom she was accusing of rape. He was likely the second person to invade her home, intending to silence her so she could not testify against him. However, police determined that the dentist had no connection to Dustin and had a solid alibi. He was at work at the time. Later, the Tracy recalled another individual who might have wanted her dead. His name was John Pittman, Tracy's first husband. They met while studying medicine at Northwestern University in Chicago. John was a fourth-year student interning at Chicago Clinical Hospital, and 19-year-old Tracy was in her first year of radiology. John was very controlling and aggressive, but Tracy was accustomed to such behavior after growing up with a domineering father, so she considered it normal. She married him, and they eventually moved to Denver, Colorado, where she gave birth to a son. As John tried to control every aspect of her life, she thought it was normal. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Tracy describes how he often abused her, especially during sex. Eventually, she grew tired of the physical violence, and they divorced. After the divorce, a custody battle began to take place. Bert revealed to his mother that his father had harassed him, leading to a contentious custody battle in court. Although there was no concrete evidence of harassment, Tracy was able to convince those present at the trial. Bert then lived with his mother. However, the long-running custody battle, which was still ongoing when the attack occurred, left John Pittman as a suspect. Even young Bert believed his father may have been involved in the attack. The police contacted John's colleagues in Virginia, where he lived, to confirm whether he had an alibi during the time of the crime. They found that he had a solid alibi. He was working at a clinic when the crime occurred. John denied any involvement and there was no evidence against him. At that time, he was a successful plastic surgeon with an excellent reputation. His acquaintances found it hard to believe that John could harm his son or kill his ex-wife, whom he had not been involved with for a long time. However, John had not been cleared yet and remained a suspect. Months passed without any progress in the case, and Tracy grew increasingly anxious. She felt unsafe knowing that the second attacker was still at large, fearing that he might return to take revenge on her. Meanwhile, the police began investigating the new suspect, Tracy's second husband, Michael. Further investigation revealed that their marriage had long since deteriorated, and the emotional connection between them had faded. Some speculated that Michael may have wanted to get rid of Tracy, a theory that received considerable support from those around them. Bert, Tracy's eldest son, revealed a disturbing truth about his stepfather. The man was very strict and often punished Bert severely for even minor infractions. Meanwhile, Tracy did not address her husband's aggressive behavior or protect her children. It is possible that Tracy had become accustomed to this type of treatment from a young age and did not realize it was a problem. Michael's behavior was noted by the police during a hospital visit where he visited his surviving relatives. His reaction seemed to be genuine shock at finding them still alive, suggesting that this outcome was not what he had wanted. Michael had a strong alibi. He was in another city on business. This was confirmed by CCTV footage. He was later given a lie detector test, but failed it and appeared to be hiding something. The police suspected he may have been involved in planning the attack. He did not inform his wife about the failed lie detector test. Tracy eventually discovered the truth about the lie detector test. Tracy became increasingly paranoid, believing that both her husband and his friend were conspiring against her to gain sole custody of their child. She shared her suspicions with the police chief, citing a dream in which Michael mentioned the plot. Tracy believed that her husband was indeed involved in the case. The police began investigating Michael and discovered that his IT business was struggling and he was in large debt. However, the couple held multi-million-dollar life insurance policies, which may have motivated Michael to eliminate Tracy to solve his financial problems. Additionally, he had a close relationship with Dustin, which may have led him to convince the young man to help him. Despite these theories, there was no concrete evidence linking Michael to any wrongdoing. Tracy and Michael's relationship became increasingly strained. In 2004, 3 years after the attack, they divorced. At the time, police had not found enough evidence to arrest Michael. After the divorce, Tracy and her children moved away. She changed her home, her job, and even her name to escape and protect herself from potential threats. Meanwhile, her friend Mona also moved to another city with her daughters. The tragedy not only affected Dustin's life, but also led to the death of his father a year later. On Thanksgiving Day 2002, Dustin's father chose to end his life at Dustin's grave. The father was devastated by his son's death, especially because of the judgmental looks from others who viewed Dustin as a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Mona, devastated by a series of losses, could not stop questioning what really happened the day her son arrived at Tracy's house. Mona refused to believe that he intended to hurt the people he admired. Michael's family was important to Dustin. He struggled with social interactions and felt safe and grateful to be with Michael, who understood him. The Mona intended to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Tracy Roberts to hold her accountable for Dustin's death and to uncover what happened that night. Mona lawyers launched their own investigation and discovered inconsistencies in Tracy's repeated accounts of the event. In one version, she claimed to have recognized Dustin immediately, while in another, she said she only learned his identity later. Additionally, she described shooting from different positions in her various retellings. Due to these discrepancies and the confusion surrounding the details, the lawyers concluded that her story was fabricated. On the day of the murder, Mona was busy shopping for Christmas. She called home to check if Dustin was up yet, as he had an important meeting scheduled. Her daughter answered and said that Dustin had left. She was relieved that Dustin was awake and going about his business. Later, Mona's nephew called to inform her that something had happened at Tracy's house. Mona rushed over, suspecting that Tracy and Michael had hurt each other, but she could not fathom that her son had been murdered. Mona mentioned that the day before the murder, Tracy had invited her son to her house to ask for help with something. Mona believed that this was Tracy's way of luring Dustin into a trap. She believed that Tracy was hiding something. However, no one paid attention to Mona's testimony until 7 years after the Roberts burglary. The same investigative team revisited the case and began to suspect that Tracy might not be the hero protecting her son, but a potential killer. There was no sign of forced entry or attempted robbery in the house. How could two people have broken in without leaving any evidence? Dustin had 9 gunshot wounds, indicating he had been shot at close range with no chance of survival, and there was no evidence of a second attack. The police decided to speak with Tracy's first husband, John. He described her as a monster, revealing that she had had bouts of aggression, including one time when she pointed a gun at him while threatening violence. She eventually fired a shot into the ceiling, prompting him to call the police. John discovered that Tracy was both aggressive and unfaithful. She drained their bank accounts. He even hired a private detective because he suspected she was cheating, and the detective confirmed that several of Tracy's lovers left their home while John was at work. Eventually, John filed for divorce because he began to fear Tracy. Concerned about their son growing up in such a toxic environment with an unstable mother, he fought for custody. This enraged Tracy, who tried to turn their son against John. A dentist was accused of raping Tracy during a dental appointment, but he claimed that she had been harassing him for a long time and was willing to prove it. His practice was equipped with cameras and the recordings supported his claim. It was revealed that Tracy, upon learning of this, had withdrawn her complaint against the dentist the day before the incident. Tracy's second husband, Michael, who she accused of being abusive and harassing her, denied all her allegations to police. He said Tracy was unfaithful. Michael claimed that he put up with these problems for the sake of his children but eventually decided to divorce her. He described himself as a strict father who never abused his wife and children and claimed that Tracy turned the children against him after their divorce. After the divorce, Michael moved to California to focus on his business. The Tracy seemed to slander everyone around her, presenting herself as a victim of abuse from the men in her life. However, the reality was quite the opposite. Police believed that her account of the events from December 13, 2001, was just another lie fabricated by Tracy. The police wanted to meet with Bert to gather more information, but Tracy not only moved to another state and changed her personal information, she also frequently changed her contact information. The police had to thoroughly review the entire list of evidence again. One significant item was an old computer discovered in the back seat of Dustin's car. Tracy believed this computer was crucial evidence in the robbery because it belonged to her husband. However, it was puzzling why Dustin would steal it when there were more valuable and easier to take items available in the house. Additionally, a pink notebook was found in which Dustin had written plans for the murder shortly before his death. The notes indicated that his mission included killing Tracy Roberts, and surprisingly, the person who ordered the assassination was Tracy's first husband, John. However, there was a strange detail in these notes. They contained so many specific details about events that Dustin could not have known before the attack, yet they were written in his own handwriting. It seemed that Dustin had written them under duress, possibly under threat. Dustin's mother did not recognize the pink notebook, which seemed more suited for a woman. Dustin disliked this color and would never have purchased such a notebook. He never kept diaries, and the only content in this notebook was a crime plan, which appeared unusual. It looked brand new and seemed to have been used only once for those notes. It suggested that Tracy might have given the notebook to someone to stage a crime. The latest investigation revealed that Dustin was not the attacker but Tracy's victim. It was also revealed that Tracy had been facing problems in her new town in Nebraska, where she had recently moved. She was charged with falsifying documents and false identity. 10 years after the murder, the police discovered the truth. On July 27, 2011, the police arrested Tracy. The memories of a friend who had helped Tracy clean out her house provided vital information. The friend knew about a notebook containing Dustin's confession. The police discovered that all of these statements had been recorded at Tracy's request. Police found no signs of an attack in the house. The wounds to her neck were self-inflicted, as evidenced by minor scratches that were not life-threatening. The claim that Dustin had struggled to stand up after being shot multiple times was clearly implausible. Forensic experts analyzed crime scene photographs and determined, based on blood spatter, that Dustin was still lying on the floor, with all the shots coming from above. This contradicted Tracy's version of events. The defense argued that Tracy was simply trying to protect her child. They said much of the evidence against her was circumstantial. The defense relied heavily on the testimony of Tracy's eldest son, Bert. He claimed that he heard men screaming and saw someone dragging his mother out the door. Bert also confirmed that the attacker told his mother that she was dead and warned that he would be next. He then saw a young man with a gunshot wound trying to get up, as his mother had described. However, the reliability of Bert's testimony has been questioned. Tracy initially mentioned that the nursery door was closed at the time, preventing Bert from witnessing the incident. The prosecution argued that Bert's account may have been influenced by his mother. The prosecution argued that Tracy killed Dustin to frame her husband, hoping to gain sole custody of their children and access to his money. This was considered the primary motive for the crime. That same day, Tracy confronted Dustin at gunpoint, forced him to write in a notebook, and then shot him. She then staged a scene to make it look like she had been attacked, inflicting minor injuries on herself and leaving a notebook and a computer in Dustin's car. A forensic expert later confirmed that her injuries were inconsistent with her being unconscious, further casting doubt on her testimony. After reviewing the evidence, the jury found Tracy Roberts guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tracy cried in court when she heard the verdict, but many people did not believe her tears, as they did not seem genuine. Again, she seemed to be acting. The situation was especially difficult for Bert, who was convinced that his mother had saved the lives of all her children that night and had been wrongly imprisoned. He continued to visit and support her. Years later, Tracy's second husband, Michael, with the approval of the guardianship agency, took the children back to Australia with his new wife. Tracy maintains her innocence and is currently serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility in Iowa. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Roni Reuter. On the morning of Thursday, October 4, 2007, neighbors of Roni heard heart-wrenching screams and loud bangs coming from her apartment. Alarmed, they called 911 and requested authorities to investigate. The police arrived immediately, and when no one came to open the door, they forced their way inside. In the kitchen, they found a woman lying face down, wearing body armor, with wounds to her head, arms, and pregnant belly. It appeared she had tried to shield her unborn child by covering her stomach with her hands, causing both her hands and stomach to be injured. There were 2 wounds to her abdomen, indicating that the baby was the main target of the attack. The attacker then inflicted injuries to the back of her head. Tragically, both she and her unborn child were dead. The brutality of the crime left the police deeply shaken, questioning who could commit such a horrific act against a pregnant woman. A forensic investigation uncovered a spent 9mm cartridge case and 5 unused cartridges near the body. There were no signs of forced entry, robbery, or sexual assault, ruling out a random attack or burglary. This led investigators to believe the murder was personal and premeditated. It seems that Roni has a dangerous enemy who has harmed her. Police theorize that the attacker attacked Roni as she was preparing to leave the apartment to go to work, ambushing her when she opened the door. Detectives interviewed her neighbors, hoping to find witnesses or valuable leads. The neighbors reported hearing sounds resembling gunshots, leading authorities to suspect the killer used a silenced weapon. A neighbor reported seeing a skinny African-American teenager wearing a hooded sweatshirt walking up the stairs to Ronnie's door at around 7:00 a.m., shortly before the incident. Later, another neighbor saw this person running out of the house, get into a small black car, and drive away from the parking lot. Police reviewed surveillance footage from cameras near the house. The footage captured a black car, likely a Volkswagen, arriving at 7:04 a.m. and leaving at 7:55 a.m., aligning with the time frame of the murder. However, the driver of the car has not yet been identified. Inside Ronnie's purse, investigators discovered a mysterious letter. The letter referenced Sean, the father of her unborn child, and claimed to have uncovered details about him. It alleged that Sean had romantic relationships with women from various countries, listing the names and phone numbers of 16 women he had affairs with. The letter also mentioned Ronnie's pregnancy, stating that Sean did not want the baby. Detectives suspected the murder was linked to Ronnie's pregnancy and believed Sean might have crucial information. The teenager seen near the house became the primary suspect, and both he and the black car were placed on a wanted list. Meanwhile, investigators began looking into Ronnie's social relationship to determine if she had any enemies. She was born in the small town of Potosi, Wisconsin. She met Sean at a charity event in Wisconsin, and the two quickly fell in love. After completing college, she moved to Deerfield, Illinois, a wealthy Chicago suburb with a population of 20,000. At the time of the murder, Ronnie was 42 years old, lived alone in her condominium. She was 7 months pregnant, eagerly preparing for the arrival of her first child, a baby girl she planned to name Skylar. The father of her child was Sean, 45, her partner of 17 years. Despite dating for many years, they did not marry or live together. Sean, a former Chicago Bears football player, was questioned by detectives for 10 hours. He shared how much he loved Ronnie and was looking forward to their child's birth. Ronnie deeply loved him, but Sean's feelings were more complex. He admitted to detectives that he had multiple affairs, which strained their relationship. He said that Ronnie knew about his infidelity, and it had caused her to grow distant from him. Despite this, he insisted he was excited to become a father. He appeared heartbroken over the tragic deaths of Ronnie and their unborn baby, and his emotions seemed genuine. Additionally, his strong, athletic build did not match the description of the thin teenager a neighbor claimed to have seen. Sean told the police that he had overslept that morning, he waking up at 9:15 a.m. and then went to a barbershop for a haircut. This alibi was confirmed by the barbershop administrator. However, the barbershop was close to Ronnie's house, just a 10-minute walk from her home, which made the detectives suspicious. They considered the possibility that Sean might have killed Ronnie or orchestrated the crime by hiring someone else. Despite his alibi, investigators did not eliminate him as a suspect and continued looking into his potential involvement. They questioned Sean's friends to evaluate whether he was capable of murder, his relationship with Ronnie, and whether he truly wanted the child. Sean's close friends have strenuously denied that he committed the crime, insisting that he was delighted to be a father, despite his relationships with other women. When detectives visited Sean's home for a follow-up interview, they discovered parenting books and baby items, indicating that he was preparing for fatherhood. During the interview, police asked who he thought might be responsible for the crime. He listed 16 women he had recently been involved with, and emphasized one name in particular, Monika Kurowska. Sean said that Monika, a fitness model from Poland, was someone he had dated while living in Europe. Their relationship ended a year ago, but Monika couldn't accept the breakup and began stalking him. She traveled to the United States and started following him. One night, she came to his apartment complex, ringing all the doors, including those of his neighbors and his own. When he stepped outside, he discovered a broken window and noticed Monika had blood on her hand. He found her behavior very worrying and dangerous, so he took out a restraining order against her. Sean suspects that Monica is the one who sent letters to Roni and his other lovers. These letters caused conflict between him and Roni. He suspects Monica because she follows him and knows all his secrets. In addition, the letters contain common errors in people who are just learning to speak English, like Monica. Even his mother received such a letter. Detectives became interested in Monica and eventually located her. During questioning, Monica denied any involvement in Roni's death, claiming she had an alibi. She was at work on the morning of the murder. The police confirmed her alibi. Monica shared a slightly different account of events. She admitted traveling to the USA to see Sean, hoping to win him back. Upon arriving at his home, she discovered him with another woman. In a fit of anger, she knocked hard on the window and accidentally broke it. Following this incident, she ended her relationship with Sean and claimed it was the last time she saw him. She also denied sending letters to Roni or Sean's mother, but the police remained skeptical of her story and continued to view her as a suspect. Despite their efforts, the investigation stalled. They suspect both Sean and Monica, as each had a motive to harm Roni, but both had alibis. No other suspects emerged. Then, the case took an unexpected turn. Police continued to question all of Roni and Sean's relatives. During the investigation, an acquaintance of theirs expressed suspicions about Marnie Yang, who was said to be obsessed with Sean. Investigators learned that Marnie had been in a relationship with Sean. The two had met 6 years earlier at a Chicago Bears convention, and Sean later reached out to her for help with real estate. Marnie, a realtor, had facilitated several real estate transactions for him. Marnie, single mother of 3 children, worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, including as a realtor, a waitress, and even photographer. Over time, she grew close to Sean, and their relationship continued up until Roni's murder. It was later revealed that they had slept together the day before the crime. This led investigators to scrutinize Marnie more closely. After speaking with her family and friends, they concluded that Marnie was obsessed with Sean. She viewed him as her possession and wouldn't leave him alone. When she discovered he had other relationships, she became furious. Her jealousy drove her to want he all to herself, believing he should belong only to her. She calls him her boyfriend, despite the fact that their relationship was short and fleeting. Detectives questioned Marnie, but she firmly denied any involvement in the crime. Despite this, she was unable to provide an alibi for the time of the murder. She claimed she was at home with her children, but the lack of evidence to support this made her the primary suspect. Detectives believe Marnie fits the description of the person they are looking for. With her petite build, she could easily be mistaken for a teenager if she was wearing a sweatshirt and hood. After obtaining a search warrant for the home, police discovered several important clues. Upon examining Marnie's computer, they discovered she had access to Sean's email and had been secretly monitoring his messages. Among the emails, they found letters from Monica to Sean written in broken English. Marnie had mimicked Monica's writing style, including the grammatical errors. She sent anonymous letters to several women involved in Sean's life, such as Roni and his mother. These letters contained accusations about Sean's relationships, and investigators concluded that her intention was to frame Monica as the main suspect. However, her plan ultimately failed. The police discovered a broken computer hard drive and several bank statements in Marnie's trash. The bank statements showed that she had hired a private investigator to collect detailed information about all the women in Sean's life, including their full names and addresses. Inside Marnie's apartment, investigators found postal receipts with the addresses of Roni and several other women who had received anonymous letters. It also came to light that Marnie owned a gun. In September 2005, she was stopped at the airport for purchasing and transporting 2 pistols and 200 rounds of ammunition. Although she provided the required paperwork, the weapons were declared and shipped to Chicago. Marnie's former lover, who was a deputy sheriff, confirmed that she owned multiple pistols and was highly skilled at shooting. One of her guns was a 9mm pistol, the same type used to kill Roney, though this particular weapon was never located. Investigators also learned that Marnie had attempted to construct her own silencer. Her bank statements revealed she had purchased a book titled How to Make a Disposable Silencer, along with a hacksaw and other materials from Home Depot. It can be used to make a disposable muffler. Detectives questioned Marnie about the evidence they had gathered. She said she bought the book as a joke gift for a friend and insisted she did not own a 9mm pistol or have any involvement in the crime. Despite her denials, 40-year-old Marnie was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Roney and her unborn child, based on the circumstantial evidence. The prosecution argued that Marnie's actions were driven by jealousy. She was infatuated with Sean and obsessed with keeping him to herself. To eliminate her rival, she sent anonymous letters to other women in Sean's life, causing many of them to leave him. However, Roney stayed. Although upset with Sean, Roney maintained their relationship, especially since she was carrying his child, a child he deeply wanted. Marnie doesn't want this child to be born because she knows that it might cause Sean and Roney to become more attached. Marnie's primary objective was to kill both the child and Roney. During the trial, witnesses familiar with Marnie testified about her extreme obsession with Sean and the drastic actions she took for his attention. They revealed that she had hacked into Sean's email account, read his correspondence with other women, and angrily deleted messages before he could see them. When she discovered emails from a woman named Monica, she devised a plan. Marnie, in Monica's writing style, sent an article exposing Sean from an anonymous email account with many errors. She spent the entire day talking about Sean, causing her colleagues to become concerned about her behavior. At the trial, even Marnie's daughter, Emilian, testified against her mother. Emilian, 20, expressed concern about Marnie's erratic behavior and obsession with Sean, which seemed to have driven her out of control. Sean also took the stand, detailing his tumultuous relationship with Marnie. He described their relationship as intense, but revealed that Marnie became deeply upset when she found out about other women in his life. She tried every way to keep him, but the obsession in her actions eventually drove him away. Sean said he had been planning to break up with her. When asked whether he believed Marnie could have murdered Roney, who was pregnant, he hesitated and expressed doubt. The prosecution's key witness was Christy Passion, a friend of Marnie's. Christy testified that Marnie had been reading Sean's emails and frequently expressed dissatisfaction with his relationships with other women. In the summer of 2007, Marnie confided in Christy about her frustration over Sean dating other women, and even mentioned plans to kill him. At the time, Christy took it as a joke and assumed she was simply venting. However, when Marnie discovered that Roney was pregnant, her focus shifted. She saw Roney as her main rival and became determined to eliminate Roney's at any cost. She told Christy about her plans to kill Roney instead of Sean, believing this would allow her and Sean to be happy together. Christy once again paid no attention to this, thinking it was just Marnie's imagination. Marnie later admits to Christy that she brought the weapon to Roney's apartment, but could not bring herself to do it. This confession makes Christy nervous, but Christy tries to comfort her and stop her from acting on her emotions. The day before the murder, she asked Christy to read her fortune to see if she would succeed in killing Roney. As an experienced tarot reader, Christy laid out the cards, and the one Marnie chose suggested success. Obsessed with the idea of killing Roney, the pregnant woman, Marnie ignored Christy's pleas and remained determined to carry out her plan. Christy later contacted Marnie, and they arranged to meet. During their conversation, Christy secretly wore a recording device, and the recording was later used as evidence. At this meeting, Marnie confessed to killing Roney, explaining the details of the crime. She revealed that she had disguised herself by wearing a wig, dark makeup, and gloves to avoid leaving any evidence. Marnie said she knocked on Roni's apartment door, and when Roni opened it, she drew her weapon and entered the house. She acted quickly, attacked Roni before Roni could scream. She admitted to being cautious, ensuring she didn't touch anything in the apartment and keeping her gloves on to avoid leaving traces. Marnie also described renting a black car, using a disposable phone, and then throw away the murder weapon, wig, gloves, and clothing in separate trash bins. She planned the murder meticulously so that it could not be detected, but Christie would testify against her. The recorded conversation became the prosecution's most compelling piece of evidence during the trial. The police investigation showed that Marnie's work computer had directions to Roni's house saved. They also confirmed that she rented a black Volkswagen on October 3. The vehicle's route was tracked from the rental location to Roni's apartment and back. However, the defense argued that there was no physical evidence that Marnie was at the scene, including DNA, fingerprints, or phone records. The case was based largely on circumstantial evidence in Christie's testimony. The defense wanted to discredit Christie by emphasizing her dubious background. They revealed that she had once claimed to be a psychic in the U.S. Army and said she was the sole survivor of a mission in the Middle East. However, it was later proven that she had fabricated her military service and had never even been in the Middle East. She had lied to enhance her qualifications for the role. The defense argued that Christie's testimony was unreliable and accused the police of falsely assigning blame to Marnie for the murder. The defense argued that there was no concrete evidence against Marnie, other than circumstantial evidence and recordings made under duress. The lawyer argued that Marnie confessed out of fear and in an attempt to protect her children, as her eldest son was under suspicion. Furthermore, an unidentified fingerprint was discovered on the door handle of Roni's apartment. The lawyer emphasized that the fingerprint did not belong to Marnie and that the police had failed to determine who it belonged to. The prosecutor acknowledged the existence of the fingerprint, confirming it was not in any database. However, they contended that the print could have been left by anyone passing by and was not necessarily linked to the crime. Marnie was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder for killing Roni Reuter and Roni's unborn child. She received 2 life sentences without parole. She and her lawyers opposed the sentence and filed an appeal, but it was denied. Marnie later claimed that she deliberately confessed to the murder to Christie to protect her son and stop people from bothering her. However, no one believed her explanation. Why would she include so many specific details about the murder if they weren't true? This makes no sense. The defense team argued that the black car seen on surveillance footage was not the Volkswagen that Marnie had rented. They also stated that a man had informed the police he had stolen Marnie's gun months before the murder, meaning she did not possess a gun at the time. Additionally, the murder weapon was never recovered at the crime scene. Fingerprints belonging to someone else were found, and they did not match Marnie's or any family member's fingerprints. The lawyer pointed out that male DNA was discovered on the cartridges at the crime scene, but it did not match Marnie's DNA and instead belonged to an unidentified man. The defense stressed that forensic analysis of the shooting angle indicated the attacker was taller than Marnie. Crucially, new CCTV footage from a hair salon showed Sean arriving for a haircut much later than he had claimed during police questioning. The footage revealed that he arrived at 10 a.m. on the day of Roni's murder, and she was killed before 8 a.m. Sean had previously told police he slept until 9:15 a.m. that morning, but evidence showed he had already sent a message to Roni and made several phone calls by 8:50 a.m. This video exposed inconsistencies in Sean's timeline, suggesting he could have had enough time to commit the murder. While the defense suspects Sean of being the perpetrator, they have not yet succeeded in having the case reopened. Marnie is still in prison and maintains her innocence. Sean, a former Chicago Bears player, played for the team for 11 seasons from 1984 to 1994, including their Super Bowl win in 1985. Having overcome his struggles in the United States, he now lives in London, United Kingdom, where he works as an NFL analyst for Sky Sports, a British sports channel, and regularly shares his expert analysis on weekly broadcasts.